Welcome to Flat Earth Debate, Uncut and After Show. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they premiere, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also below this video you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy, and this is of particular note if you drive an electric vehicle. Speaking of Patrons, I'm going to do a shout out to all of you who do support me on Patreon, so a massive shout out of thanks and appreciation to Rob H, Ben White, Maximum Gravy, Austin Whitsitt, John Kays, Tommy Swagnuts, Michael Kahn, Patrick Gunnels, Banter, Will Brax, Mel B Styles, Troy Shuker, Bose Nail, Samson, Maris, Harry Blade, Mobile Max 777, Neo the One, Rob W, Open Minded, Reese Pound, Dal West Watson, Mike, Muted, Maria Nealands, Unbelievable Productions, Blue Ridge Ranger, The Real Gabster, Liam Nedrick Jr., Abraham Mohammed, Adrian Quintana, Skeptic936, Life is Short, theflatearthchannel.com, Texas Mike, and David Wayne Foster. So another massive thank you to all of you for supporting me on Patreon. Now I will hand over to whoever is in Discord and Google so you can enjoy their dulcet tones while I set up for today's live show.
Yes, we can.
Good morning, good morning. I posted a lot of slides in Master B, so if we get some dead air in the show, I'll go over it because it's worth repeating, as you said. So I said, fine, I'll put up a bunch of slides and I'll repeat them.
Okay, we'll hustle a few more people in first.
Yeah, not now. I'm talking about at the showtime because we're close to the showtime.
Okay.
See how the day goes.
Hey John, hey Neil. And hello Righteous, thank you for replying.
How am I coming in?
Beautiful, Neil.
Great. We'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah, you sound the best so far this week.
Hey, is anybody getting ready to bring up any points? Because I have one I want to bring up.
You feel free.
Well, I just didn't want to interrupt any conversations that might be going somewhere.
No, I'm going to queue up 10th Man slideshow ready for if there is any dead air. I will take that under advisement for sure.
Well, it has to do with the definition of diffraction, because I've been thinking about this for quite a while. But I do have to put a disclaimer on it. Like, if you're talking about light with the convention of frequencies, it is not wrong to call diffraction interference. Having said that, I don't think interference, I think maybe the term interference may be causing some of the problems when people discuss what light is. Because interference is defined as when two waves, what is a peak and a trough, collide, canceling the wave out. Has anybody got an objection to any of that so far?
No, not really. I mean, interference, you could, in audio terms, when you're talking about two out-of-phase waves interfering with one another, well, it causes phase cancellation, which is a classification of distortion. So, distortion, interference, same thing. No, I've not got an issue with that.
Well, I think it has diffraction because the reification of the particle movement has been reified into waves. That's
Correct.
the biggest thing.
Yeah, in both instances, audio and with light. Yeah, in both instances, there's a danger that people can reify the convention being used to describe. So, in terms of waveform with audio, you're talking about particle velocity and particle pressure. depending on the circumstance, and depending on the quarter wavelength, and depending on the dimensions, and all the rest of the other things that go along with that particle velocity. That's not a wave in any way, shape, or form. It's been oversimplified to describe it with waves, and the interference that you get between particles at velocity or at lack of velocity when they impact the surface, they go to zero. But all of these sort of reified concepts, same goes with Rayleigh Criterion, which I knew you were talking about. You weren't talking about sound, but I just threw it in for a bit of flavour. So when you talk about the Rayleigh Criterion and the two waves that they show interfering with one another and showing that one is therefore unresolvable because it's having interference with the one next to it. So therefore you can't distinguish one from the other. Interference, i.e. you can't resolve the two. One is interfering with the other. But again, an oversimplification when you describe what you're seeing as like a wave on a graph. Well, it isn't, is it?
Well, no, and I think the difference between interference and diffraction has to do with certainty.
Yeah, absolutely. So a diffraction pattern, just to clarify, because this will, just for the audience's benefit, if nothing else, a diffraction pattern would be the probability distribution of a particle of light hitting a sensor or a piece of photographic plate, doesn't matter which. But when you fire off one, it might go to, let's just give it 5 locations. So from left to right, position 1, position 2, position 3 in the centre, and then on the right of that, position 3 and position 4. You fire one particle through, you don't know where it's going to hit. There is uncertainty in terms of where that will hit. It might hit 1, it might hit 3. You just don't know. Now, the pattern that uncertainty or probability, it's going to be mathematically qualified later as probability, so we'll stick with that word. The likelihood of that probability can be defined mathematically as something called a wave function. That would be a probability distribution. How likely is it to hit position 3? Well, the one in the middle, most likely, but not certain. So, how likely is it to hit? Go on.
There is actually more to it than that, because there is single slit diffraction as well. Have you heard of that?
Sure, but it's double slit or single slit. It makes no difference. Diffraction's diffraction. Nope. Putting light through a slit will cause interference. And it doesn't matter if you're putting it through a double slit or a single slit, because in the case of that particular example, you can qualify the difference, which is where I was just about to round off with, actually. I will do that and I'll let you continue. I'm really, really sorry jumping all over your point. But regardless if it's a single slit diffraction or a double slit diffraction, makes no odds. Diffraction is diffraction. The probability of where it will lie on the wall after it goes through one or other or a single slit and diffracts, i.e. you've got an interference pattern, otherwise known as probability distribution, that you can qualify as a wave function mathematically, then reified into a diagrammatical description of a wave. Yeah? Well, regardless, single or double, the comparison, well, what does the light do if it's not diffracted? Well, you know where it's going to go. In the case of a single slit, if you want to use that example, it goes through the slit and hits behind it, directly behind the slit. Every time you fire it through, it hits behind the slit. That's as simple as that. So there is no diffraction, there is no interference, there is no distribution to have a probability of one position over another. It's just hitting one position. That's the difference between something that's got a probability spread or a probability distribution versus something that is certain, something that is just going to hit position, in my example earlier, it would just be position 3, goes through the slit, hits in the middle.
Well, see, that's what I was getting ready to say, is the single slit diffraction, right? You'll know it will hit behind that slit, but the exact point at which it will hit is unknown. It's an uncertainty. So you'll still have diffraction upon the outer edges of that pattern you're looking at. So there still is single slit diffraction. Like I said, I think diffraction has more to deal with uncertainty And it's that uncertainty that's being reified into a what is and described as a wave pattern.
Well, it is very literally a description of uncertainty, if you want to phrase it in that way. So you're trying to qualify how certain you can be about something you aren't certain about. The likelihood of something occurring, the inverse of that is how you don't know which one it's going to be and how likely your guess will be correct. Well, that is, in essence, uncertainty that you're trying to qualify. But no matter how many times you guess with probability distributions, you guess that, well, there's a 25% chance that it'll hit in the middle over a 12% chance it'll hit a position 2 or 3, either side, left or right of it. So you go, okay, because of the higher percentage, I'm going to guess position 3 in the middle. So you fire one, and it hits at position 1. In other words, that is the essence of uncertainty, right? Well, it was only a low probability. It hit position 1. What do you know? But it did. On this occasion.
Okay, well, now that we're in agreement, there was a scientist, I don't know if he was a philosopher or a scientist, who said that no one has adequately been able to describe the difference between diffraction and interference. And I think in that, certainty and uncertainty, because a wave and a trough will cancel each other out, and you can be certain of that as you watch it happen. But we're not talking about waves and troughs when we're talking about diffraction.
Correct.
We're talking about particles of light, and I think that's the distinction.
And there is no distinction between diffraction and interference. I mean, you can further qualify it out with different English language words. I used distortion, didn't I? So, I could rephrase it and say nobody can adequately define the difference between diffraction and distortion. You know what I mean? Because distortion means a lot of things. And in terms of what it is, well, when I qualified it earlier in terms of the particle velocity and its propagation in between what are reified into waves and how those waves overlap, causing an increase in overall pressure. Well, that, again, it's sort of all to do with waves and everything to do with particles and how they move or how they are accelerated by another mass pushing them and how they interact one after the other and their velocity in doing so. But where do we get these waves from? And how do we decide that when you've got a quarter wavelength, when one sits on top of the other, you're going to get an interference of a certain description? Well, merely our descriptions. The problem only occurs when you work outside of conventions. These are really useful ways of describing an effect that is essentially, in the case of sound, say a speaker moving a cone that moves the air that vibrates your inner ear. Well, that process is just air movement. Where's the wave? Well, there isn't one, but I can really easily describe what occurs at various different frequencies if I translate that into a wave and then describe or draw that wave as getting closer together as the frequency increases. That's just a nice way of being able to depict it and describe it. Does it mean that there's little squiggles coming into my ear? No, definitely not. Does it mean that when the particle velocity overlaps and causes an increase or decrease, that is somehow a wave actually increasing or decreasing its size, like a wave in the ocean getting bigger? No, it causes an increase in pressure. That would be air pressure. Again, where does that show in a larger wave? Well, I can say that the height is equal to the increase of pressure. But what is an increase in pressure? An increased amount of stuff pressing on other stuff. That's how it actually is, as opposed to the convention used to describe it. So, it's kind of being a clever dick saying you can't, I don't know who said that, it's really arrogant of me to do so, but to say you can't distinguish between interference and diffraction is like, well, duh. Yeah, okay. I've kept the live show off just to get that little rant out. Good point, though. Well, very interesting as well.
Yeah, but the point I was trying to make is he was speaking within the convention and making a claim about reality using the convention, and that's why it's clever, Dick.
Ah.
See,
Gotcha.
it's a little trick, a little word trick he used.
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, how dare you, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, and join button to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also below this video you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy, and this is a particular note if you drive an electric vehicle. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcomed back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. One last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by Refracted Curvature, 10th Man, Neil, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all. Oh, and Arwen, my bad. And we've lost Refracted Curvature.
Yeah, he has an appointment with a doctor, he said. Good morning, everybody.
Hey, good morning from Discord.
Morning.
Hooray! Good morning from Discord. Don't have to fret and stress about no responses. Happy days. Hey, and we've got Quantum Racer here early. What's going on? I'm in the middle of breakfast. Oh, okay, QE. We'll leave you to it then. Jolly good. Nice to have you in this early hour of the morning. Any evidence?
What a treat.
Yes, what a treat to get zero response out of him. Right at the beginning of the live show. I should have really checked if he was actually around beforehand, but there we go. Hey, Steve.
Daylight savings time.
Of course, getting that extra hour. Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere-edge horizon, formerly known as the curve of the Earth?
Not today.
It only exists in the math.
To even state it, you're going to need an R.
They told me off in Bev's chat. They were like, I asked for R, and they're like, what R? What do you mean R? I was like, Earth radius. And they're like, nobody calls that R. Really? Okay, fine. Earth radius. Any evidence of Earth radius?
ER, you
know how
mean?
many times we actually have to spend 5 minutes explaining to them that their horizon is the edge of their sphere. They seem to have claimed that boats and buildings can be blocked, but then still don't link the idea that that is a physical edge that has to be there, which is set by the radius, like you just say. It seems like the first 10 minutes now of these arguments, you actually have to explain that and make sure that they understand that before you can go ahead.
Yeah, the Earth radius is currently in the ER being intubated.
What about any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety? Tap, tap, tap. Is this thing on?
Reference frames
What a
ruined.
ludicrous preponderance that.
You're gonna need R for that.
I've lost track of the order. Where were we? Self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth. Any evidence of that?
Nope, nothing whatsoever. Was a big topic in my show today, or rather, terrestrial things concerning lava tubes, caves, and what is beneath the ocean. floor? Like, what is actually beneath there? Is there lava of any kind? Probably not, but we haven't dug deep enough to even figure it out. And also, geothermal heat isn't to be found everywhere, only near volcanic regions. So what is really beneath all that? We still don't know.
You guys remember the movie 2012 when they said that the world was going to end due to the Mayan calendar? And they said that the crust was destabilizing on top of the magma. And the whole movie was about the floor falling into itself and lava shooting up. And it's such an amazing, if we were floating on these little rafts of land on top of a magma soup, you would expect that type of radical transformation of the surface all the time. Whereas we've got a very stable surface, no movement is ever registered, except for maybe the occasional earthquake. But the actual surface doesn't move, so it can't be rafted floating on top of a magma lake.
Right, and also the oceanic floor. Look at how incredibly even that whole thing is. That giant surface is one of the most even things out there. Like, even underneath all the fallout dust that is dropped to the ocean bottom, underneath that, it's very even. So if there was something liquidy underneath a layer of rock, well, it would probably become more uneven. It would wobble around. It would cave in at spots. Well, the ocean doesn't seem to do that. The ocean floor is very even, making the chances that there's anything other than pure solid rock underneath very unlikely, in my opinion.
Well, what about the cola hole?
Go ahead, Chaos.
Can you hear me?
We hear you.
Okay. What about the cola hole that went 7.5 miles down into the crust? And they said that it was abandoned because of the temperatures that reached 356 degrees Fahrenheit.
What about it?
Did that borehole even reach Mariana Trench bottom depth? I think that the borehole was dug a whole lot higher.
Yeah, it was only like a fraction of the crust.
Right.
But they claim that it reached 356 degrees Fahrenheit, which if they were to dig deeper and deeper, it would get hotter and hotter, yeah?
But did the drill bit actually generate that heat, or is there literally a measurable constant heat down there even after the drill was removed?
It actually gets hotter down there.
Well, that I don't know. I do not know that. They don't claim if the drill was producing the heat or if the ground was producing the heat.
Or both.
Both are considered 12
there you
kilometers.
go. So it wasn't isolated. It could have simply been that the drill couldn't handle it.
Either way, we're talking about 12k here. $12k? Hello? We're not talking like 39, 59 miles.
Correct. Also, by the way,
right.
The steel, when it twists, like a long drill is going to be basically like a giant pillar that's contorting. Contorting also creates heat. Ever tried to bend metal? It heats up.
Why are we talking about heat?
Because it was brought up. I don't know.
Okay.
Well, he was talking about on his show about how the volcano and molten lava or whatever was found X amount of miles or whatever in the ground. So I brought up the cola hole, stating that it was 356 degrees in that hole, but I don't know if it was generated by the drill or if it was coming from the ground.
As I understand it, from the ground, but also obviously the heat is going to be generated from the friction of the drill bit also. That is going to be causing more heat, but no, it just gets hotter as they got down further.
Right, but is it like a radiation heat or is it simply a heat
I
from
I
the
don't
pressure
know,
of
but
all.
who cares?
Sorry, I've been talking about this for like 2 hours.
Okay, I mean, fascinating though it is to look into the borehole, right? We're talking about molten iron core. Now, the establishment of a core, the establishment of it with a 12K or whatever it is, 8 mile deep drill hole, it kind of seems completely unrelated. If you're talking about volcanoes, the same thing applies. They've got absolutely nothing to do with molten iron cores, and everything to do with the claim of a ring of fire based on tectonic activity. That's what the current claim is, global or otherwise.
Yeah, it would be
Right, isn't
just
that
as equally
silly?
preposterous if they dug down and hit water and then presumed that the center was made of water.
The problem
And
is they
actually,
haven't done
metal
that.
loses its magneticism over with heat. The more heat applied, the less magnetic it gets.
Who
So
says
stating
there?
that we have a molten iron core, there's nothing magnetic to it.
Why is there a presupposition that when you're digging down, you're digging to a center of something?
Arwin, I assume that was directed at
I
you.
didn't use that word, did I? I'm just digging down. I didn't use the word center. I'm not being
I think
Baldwin
I
right
did.
now. All right.
Any more for this on molten iron cores?
What's been the longest addressal of the housekeeping question to date, I think. No evidence whatsoever. Not even
No
a clue.
evidence, yeah.
It's pure fiction. It's pure fiction. Every indication ever to try and get close to figuring out evidence for it has always yielded pretty much exactly the opposite.
Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
I think it's over there somewhere. I'm not sure. Kind of hazy.
Right, we interrupt this housekeeping session for a quick e-begging session. So I got my first reply from my projector repair, and before they've even started the repair, they've said that the lamp has a massive amount of hours on it and needs replacing at a cost of 300 quid, which is devastating, considering that this seems to imply that there's going to be further bills to follow, which isn't great, but there we go. So before I've even started with them fixing it, they already want 300 quid out of me, which is devastating, especially on a crappy month. Several people did already send me PayPal money, which I am very, very grateful for, which definitely softens the blow. But yeah, I could do with some help. If it escalates, they do keep piling on various parts that it needs, then I might end up doing a GoFundMe, which I really don't want to do because it's only a couple of years old. Anyway, smash the PayPal link if you'd like to support me. I say PayPal link because that's immediate, and yeah, I'm gonna have to pay this bill just to get them get going on it and actually get the damn thing fixed. There we go. Such is life. So that's the first devastating bit of news I've had in that regard. Life ain't gonna get easier. So yeah, there you go. End of e-begging. Any evidence you can have gas pressure without a container?
I'm sorry. Haven't you tried to look around? Like maybe there's a really cheap ones. Like there's overproduction, whatever. Maybe you could get lucky somewhere on eBay or something.
What are you talking about? This is something I bought a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I'm not going to replace the damn thing.
Breakdown very
I don't
quickly.
want to. Arwin, what are you doing?
Oh, sorry.
Look, I want to just draw a line into that. I will use the opportunity to e-beg again, though. Smash the PayPal link to relieve my stress level. Yeah. It's just one of those things, Arwin. It's just the solution to this problem is money. That's it. So, as much as I'm going to stutter and stammer over going, yeah, I need money to fix this problem. I've been doing it for the last week, and in drips and drabs, people have been sending me money. So, like I say, you know who you are. Thank you very much indeed. Anyway, let's just draw a line under me e-begging. I don't want to make this into a show purely about e-begging. I thought I let you go because I thought you were answering the gas pressure without a container question. Anyway,
I'm sorry.
Any evidence you can have gas pressure? No, it's all right. I don't mind nattering on a little
Can
bit
I
more.
e-bag for myself a bit? No, just kidding. But my
Gas
monitor
pressure.
is kind of dying, so I think I need to replace it.
You what? Your monitor?
Yeah. It takes me like 15 minutes minimum to get it started up now.
You should do a GoFundMe for a monitor. Anyway, that's something you can sort out on your own.
All right.
But startup is not monitor related.
This is monitor related. If it's on my show, this is my corner. I'll be e-begging on this corner. God damn it. Arwin, get lost. Go to your own damn corner.
I call for people to support you too on my show.
Gas pressure without a container before Arwin utilises my PayPal e-begging session to see if he can get a new monitor out of it. I'm already knee-deep in e-begging for monitor requirements. You can do that off your own back. I'm sure people would support you if you did a GoFundMe for a new monitor, Arwin.
I'm probably going to do that. But yeah, gas pressure without a container, well, you can't even calculate it like that. Right? So the idea of gas pressure without a container is a pure mind-based fiction because there is no tangible way to do anything with it. You can't calculate it. You can't test it. There's no way to do anything to prove that is a possibility.
Anybody had any progress in terms of gas pressure without a container? Discord, I'm talking to you.
Nope. Only if you use 2 containers.
That's what I was waiting to hear. 2 containers, you say?
No, it cannot be demonstrated without even 1 container. I just wanted to go back to the question about the distance to the sun. I was watching a documentary on a solar eclipse yesterday, and as the solar eclipse occurs and there's that blacking, that complete blackout of the sun, technically when staring at the sun, there's always the glare issue that you can never distance light. And they say bouncing a laser toward the sun basically just gets absorbed into the sun. But if it was blackened, wouldn't we then be able to determine some kind of a distance, potentially bouncing off the darkened portion? I don't know if anyone here has ever heard of something along those lines.
Anybody? I haven't.
Well, what goes dark in the sun or the moon?
Because, for example, like when you take a giant spotlight and you shine it at someone, they can't see it until you put an object in front of it. Then you can suddenly gain an idea of a distance to that based on the fact that the glare has been removed from the vision. And then once it's blackened out, or you can see that little halo effect of light around the spotlight, you'd be able to say the spotlight was at 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers. So wouldn't that be a more accurate way to determine the sun's distance? If it was a physical object to measure in the first place.
I was going to say, when you slap on that assumption, everyone can jump in. Go ahead, Darwin, you got there first.
Yeah, if it was a physical object, oh yeah, we would be able to do all kinds of things with it. We would be able to approach it. We would be able to see the angular size of it grow as we do. We would have the inverse square law being applied, making it more intense as we approach. All these things, yeah, if it was a physical object. But all those elements seem to be quite elusive. So it seems to just move with you at the apparent distance it has as you try to approach it or move at all. And doesn't seem like inverse square law of light is applying in any sort of form. It's just the universal intensity of the sunlight. And then it's gone. And then there's no remnant, no like light basically cascading around the Earth to the dark side, which would probably happen if it was really that giant, intense ball of light to which the inverse square law applied. Well, then there wouldn't really be a night sky. We would just have glare from the daylight going around it, probably. And we don't. Night skies are very dark. Right.
Any scientific evidence of gravity?
Hold up. You ain't getting any radio bounce or light wave bounce off the sun. The sun's a black body. It absorbs all light incident on it, according to their story. So there you
Have
go.
you
Right in
heard?
Discord.
Have they ever tried that during an eclipse?
An eclipse?
Because I was talking about a solar eclipse when there's some kind of a darkening, then would it still, I guess if it's a black body, it'll still be a black body regardless.
Yeah. Still a black body. Black body's a black body. You can't be an imperfect black body. You're either a black body or you're not. You're either pregnant or you're not. 1 or a 0. Simple as that. That's according.
a
You
good
can look at
point.
it in Discord if you'd like. 27 minutes after the hour.
That's a very good point, John. But on the other hand, there are plenty of baller speculators out there that actually think that they can get to a point where they can measure dark matter, right? So if they think they can do that, then they'll probably think that they can actually measure the black body of the sun. So
Dark matter is a different story than what we're talking about.
it's even worse.
No, dark matter is definitely worse. Yes.
Right. So if they think that they can measure that and they speculate on that constantly, not like, oh, what if we could measure it? No, they just say, no, I'm convinced I can measure that. So if they're convinced
Measure
that they
what?
can measure dark matter, then yeah, the leap to thinking that you could measure the black body of the sun is not that far, not that crazy to them.
I'm not following.
A little early, maybe. Anybody getting this?
Yeah, I think he was just drawing a correlation between the dark, it's a dark body, and dark energy being
No, that's
unable
not
to
what
be
we're talking
seen.
about. Yeah, that's nonsense.
But dark, in the way that they use it, does imply that it cannot be seen.
Yeah, but if you're staring right at a lunar or solar eclipse, isn't the light would still cancel out? It would still cancel out. Are we talking about a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse?
Solar. When it's a darkening in front, like the US solar eclipse that occurred, that one where it was a totality across the whole continent, that one specifically, it was like something as it darkened to the point of almost being midnight with something in front of the sun or the sun eclipsing itself, whatever it's doing. It was like this moment of suddenly you could almost register that the sun was much further away. Like while it's still glaring and it's bright, it feels like the sun is closer. It could have just been the camera. But as it darkened, it seemed to almost give a real tangible location to it. Because now you just had this glowing ring and this black core in the middle. And I was thinking, if it was the moon blocking it, we should be able to bounce a signal off whatever that darkened portion is. But then I also thought, why doesn't it gravitationally lens when that's occurring? Why doesn't the sunlight bend around the moon and we still have daylight anyway? So they've always got two answers for everything. Just depends which context they need.
Yeah, but you're not radar ranging the sun that way. You're bouncing something off the darkened portion in front of the sun, right? What is that? See, this is all
Which is the
convoluted.
moon?
man.
Which is the moon then?
It's presumed to be, but not proven to be.
Exactly. It's all convoluted mess.
And like you say, you'd actually be determining the distance of whatever that was. You're still not determining the sun. So
Well, then there's another problem because you have the fairy tale moon in supposedly a vacuum, right? Well, that can't be. So you have to figure out the medium between you and what you're bouncing off of. That's another problem. So there's so many unknowns, and then there's what you don't know. Yeah.
Right, I'll use that little gap to do a couple of super chat shout outs. So, hunting FTFE. When FTFE looked up, lick that globe, salt liquor, I'd hung from the dong tree. Man, this is difficult to read, James Richard. Got 'em right between the eyes. Okay, thank you very much indeed for the super chat. Really appreciate your support, James Richard. Also, I think it was Ben White. Yes, it was. Ben White, thank you very much indeed for the super chat. Support what you like, or it goes away. Indeed. Thank you very much for the super chats. Really appreciate the support. So we segued straight away from, or back from, any scientific evidence of gravity to the sun, which is fine. Good conversation, by the way. But is there any scientific evidence of gravity?
It's like saying, is there any scientific evidence for unicorns? Because gravity doesn't exist. But which gravity are we talking about?
Can I use the biology of a unicorn textbook to prove that unicorns are real? Is that okay?
You could. Yes, you could.
Cool.
In your mind.
you can think of it as such, yeah.
First, you'd have to establish gravity as something real. Good luck. First, define it. I'd like to hear that one.
Yeah, but it's talked about a lot and written down quite a lot, and Einstein's got some field equations, so therefore it's a real thing.
Field equations. Equations aren't real. Mathematics is abstract. So.
Yeah, but those equations are describing reality.
Describing reality? Well, I want to know what reality they're describing. So,
Gravity.
Einstein's space and time, right? Well, space and time are concepts. You're going to give me an equation for a concept? Really? So, two abstractions equal reality?
No.
I don't think so.
But if you imagine a piece of rubber stretched out, and then imagine a bowling ball in the middle making like a well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now imagine that if you're on top of a tennis ball or inside like a Zorb ball, so you're like, running along inside the ball. Imagine how if you ran straight, right, on the lip of that well.
Holy shit.
What's wrong? What? What's the problem here? I'm doing a really good job here. What's wrong?
Shit. This is what we call in the industry a yarn.
A yarn?
Yeah.
Like spinning you a yarn?
Yes.
No, I'm describing geodesics. I feel slightly offended by you claiming that geodesics bending in space-time with a Zorb ball example is somehow a yarn. That's outrageous.
What's like a geodesic?
More like a ball of wool laid out seemingly in a straight line, but actually wrapping around the edge of a well. Yeah, we can use a ball of wool. That works equally well. Kudos to you.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a no then?
Back to reality.
Yeah, back to reality. No scientific evidence of gravity then.
No, gravity, it's a misnomer. There's nothing there.
Has there been further discussion on Rayleigh's egg demonstration? In that I heard in 24/7 that they were talking about adding sugar to the water to increase density but not increase the electroconductivity of the water, and that the egg didn't rise when adding sugar. So therefore, almost taking it to a new degree, that there is definitely a downward bias that's electrostatic.
Hold on. Let me get it straight.
Hold on a second. Let me jump in.
Wait a second.
Yeah, everyone's
hold
getting
on.
annoyed with
Let
that.
me jump in quickly. There's a mistake here.
With a giant question mark at the end.
Solar.
Substitute the
Hold
null.
on a second.
Go ahead.
We did that live, and the sugar did raise it. I did it on webcam in Discord one time, and the sugar did raise it.
No. You missed the subtlety of what's being done here. They're righteous. That's not in contention.
Yeah, but he's got.
What actually happened there,
He's basically
righteous?
saying something. Go on.
What actually happened there was a substitution of the null. So you've suddenly got this second independent variable that's thrown in as the null to rule out electro what now? No. The null is going to be the antithesis of what you assume to be the cause of the effect. That would be varying the density of the medium. So the antithesis, if you vary the density of the medium, you don't see the effect that you're studying. That would be the phenomena of some things go up, some things go down, some things remain the same, neutral, if you will. Well, that phenomena won't be observed if you change the density as the null, as opposed to, well, then it won't be altering the electro whatever effect that's held within the water if it's salt based. That's not how null works. But that's what's happened. A new non-IV null has been introduced. Don't know why, but that's what's happened. Maybe you can tell us.
Did he define electrostatics?
People still want gravity, don't you understand? So they're going to push this dielectric, whatever it is, acceleration, and they're going to try to debunk everything, especially the egg experiment. Boy, if we could fix that and turn that around, then we'll definitely get a downward bias.
What? It doesn't have a downward bias. The directionality is medium specific. Hold on, doing downward bias. Which way did the egg move?
I thought he said at the end that there's a downward bias. That's what I heard.
My question: which way did the egg move again?
Went up.
It went up.
Oh, bye downward bias.
Let me say this. When I did that on camera, I did it live. I noticed the sugar one. The way it was buoyant in the sugar, it was more like it was different. It was different than the salt one. I got them both to raise to the top, and then at that amount in, I noticed the buoyancy of them was more floaty for the sugar one, and more easy to sink and go up in the salt one. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, the whole sugar is very syrupy, made the water thick. And salt didn't necessarily make the water thick. You needed 4 or 5 times the sugar to get that egg to raise. I was there when he did it.
Raised,
What
you
was
say?
it, 5 times sugar and 3 times salt?
In Flat Earth Solar's question, there was this elephant that's I tried to address, and we've immediately gone back up to why did it go up? Right? Now, there's 2 issues. One, there's a subsection of people that think there's a downward bias that needs to be accounted for when that did not occur. That's the first problem. The second problem is a substitution of the null, which isn't the thing that was being varied, into having some sort of electricity force attached to it. This is kind of... Go on, QE.
Electric what? Did you say, what was that word you used?
Electrical.
So I used electrostatics.
Yes, you did.
Electrostatics is considered a branch of physics where they study electric charges at rest. So the interaction
you don't know
between
what electrostatic forces are.
Sorry, who cares? That's fascinating.
No, I was going to get to the electrostatic part. I did bring it up in the beginning, but people just walked on by it. But go ahead. We can finish up with electrostatic after you're done. Go ahead.
I just want to add something really quick. I think we should just look at it like we don't have a horse in this race. Just look at it as it presents itself, instead of attacking it or not attacking it, or we should just look at it
Who said anything
Yes.
about a horse in a race?
Well, let's not sound like condescending towards it. If there is something, it is. If there's not, there's not. We just take it for what it is. We don't have to get like too attached to it one way or the other. Because then when we get attached to something, a certain side, then bias creeps in. So let's keep bias out of the way and just look at things as it presents itself.
I don't
Now, if
understand
you,
who's being biased.
I didn't say anything in, in regards to who or whatever, but how do I put it?
I got that. I think it was in relation to me, how Nathan correctly identified that I've swapped the null inadvertently, but that I'm now presuming a new cause, which I haven't even set up the experiment to test. So like you're saying, don't extrapolate and start jumping down the next rabbit hole with an assumption-based motive. Rather, just look at what is. Yes, sugar water does also get the thing to rise. I stand corrected.
Yeah, all we're trying to do is figure out if electricity in the air has anything to do with helping these things happen. You know what I mean? We did
Electricity
notice
in
some
the
strange
air.
stuff about the water. Yeah, there's electricity in the air.
Yeah, but what does that have to do with the egg in the salt or sugar water?
So that's what we're trying to.
It's a
We're just trying
variable.
to say. Yeah,
It's a
because
variable. We're
it's
trying to like
conductive.
isolate a variable or like control a variable.
I don't even know what the claim is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Oh,
it's
sugar-
Hold on,
complicated
hold
at
on.
this
Let's just
point.
address
Yeah.
that one thing at a time. Yes, righteous. Control variable. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Right.
so I'm pretty certain that the amperage that was run through the water by Anthony with the high voltage wires that he had dangled into it, he just had those turned off, didn't he? QE, they were turned off, the
Well-
high voltage wires.
Can I? Flat Earth Solar. He works in like grounding stuff. Could you explain that thing? That what you have to do, Flat Earth Server? I mean, Solar.
Yeah, so in solar energy, we've always got to ground the panels because they sort of develop an electrostatic charge that interferes with the transmission of the power. The same way that when an aeroplane lands from being in the air, it also needs to ground that electrostatic charge that's been built up while it's in the air. Reason I talk about this upward and downward is that there's a field called electromagnetic tethering, whereby they introduce a current to cause a weather balloon to rise or lower. So by introducing a certain frequency, they are able to ascend or descend in our atmosphere, almost as if they're using some kind of a field, and then either causing some interaction that they call it electromagnetic tethering. But the electrostatic force is like when you touch a doorknob and you get a shock. We're all experiencing this electrostatics from the air. And what we'd sort of, or what Riley and them had shown with the egg was that there was this density relationship. But what made me think about it was that if you now manipulate the density, but you were able to control the electrostatics, would you still have that rising of the egg? And I guess by demonstrating with sugar water that you can get it to rise, it's just that there is this electrostatic field around us, which, especially with solar, when you're placing panels on the third or fourth story on a building, it's collecting voltage, a much higher voltage at that height, and then you've got to disperse that into the grounding rod.
Okay, so if electrostatic charge, then displacement of egg. Yeah, man, science it.
No, not displacement
Yeah,
of egg.
basically-
Oh, hold on,
I'm
hold
sorry.
on. What do you mean not displacement of egg? Do you know what the phenomena being studied is? Righteous.
I'm more looking myself personally. I'm more looking at how the phenomena of buoyancy and density works.
No, that's not the phenomena of buoyancy density. No. That's the IV, not the DV. The DV is some things go up, some things go down, some things don't move
Right.
at all. That's
All right.
that's the phenomena observed. Think
Let
of
me
it.
word it like this. So Riley's thing, okay, fine. We'll say it's a scientific experiment and everything, but now we're looking to control the other variables. that fit in more? Just kind of like when we boil water by raising temperature, we control the pressure. So the pressure, the altitude, is the controlled variable. So now we're looking at this Rayleigh egg thing. Yes, buoyancy and density, up and down, but we're now looking to see what variables are there that we can account for and control them better, and see if we keep, let's say, the buoyancy and density at one level, and then manipulate the electricity and see if that affects it. Kind of like how you keep the temperature at a level with the egg. Sorry, I kind of mixed it
Yeah,
up a
that's
bit.
what I just
But if you
said.
keep the temperature,
That's what I just said, and you objected. So I was like,
all right,
okay,
all right.
okay, if electricity, then egg displacement. Go ahead and go forth and science it, if you will. Fine. You know, if you can cause the egg to do something by inducing electricity into the water, then okay, fine. You might find that in a given circumstance, like the example the flat earth solar gets, you can induce that effect. That's lovely. But generally speaking, are we going to be in a salt-based solution, generally speaking? No. Can you observe the exact same cause and effect relationship in other mediums? Yeah, it's medium specific. That's what's been proven in the experiment. Some things go up, some things go down, some things remain in equilibrium. What's the cause? Well, the density of the medium relative to the thing in it. That's it. You show it by varying that density, and that causes the effect. At that point, the book's closed. Now, can you induce the same effect? Well, you might be able to, but then you're talking about a folly in the respect that you're trying to induce the effect with a magnetic field. Now, if you can observe something that is in a magnetic field in nature, and you go, I wonder what causes that. For instance, I'll give you a for instance, spiders that can shoot up into the air because they've got a certain amount of electricity flowing through their web. For example, hypothetically speaking, you could go, there's a phenomenon I want to study, and you figure out that the cause of that effect is an electrostatic effect within that particular scenario. But then you're studying that effect, as opposed to some things go up, some things go down, some things remain neutral. Well, why? Well, depends on the medium. How dense it is, as shown in the experiment. That's it. Case closed. Unless you can show me a different phenomena.
That
Spiders on
spider
the web.
example, that's the electromagnetic tethering. And in that scenario, the spider didn't change its density, but it was able to either ascend or descend in the same way that the high altitude weather balloons, the density remains constant, but they're able to lower it into a different stratospheric layer to move the balloon where they want it to go. And in that, exactly like you say, it's a different study. So we'd have to go and study the electromagnetic relationship. But if density remains the same,
Wait a minute. So you saying the cause is the charge output of the spider? How do we determine that?
Sorry.
has been-
Sorry. How
No,
does this?
the spider is
Hello.
using the electricity to
Hello.
get the air.
Hello. Hello. Fascinating though that question is. This is not a zoo, right? Who cares?
That's how we know there's electricity in the air, because the spider uses the electricity
That's
is
truly
in
lovely.
the air.
That's really nice.
That's all.
Thank you. That's so
That led
wonderful
us
to know.
Okay, so listen, hold on. That led us to thinking about, okay, so there's electricity in the air. Would these conductors of electricity, like salt and certain other electrolytes, have anything like to add to the buoyancy? In other words, it's just a test to see what's going on with the electricity. How does it affect stuff?
Right.
That's all we're trying to do.
Okay, so to add to the already scientifically validated relative density disequilibrium explanation, further to that, you might be able to take one of the controlled variables and see if they can also affect it if you hold everything else constant and vary that within the same scenario. Yeah. So keep the density of the medium same, plop an egg in whatever it is you're plopping it in, and induce an electric field around it and see if you can make it go up or down. I've said that about 3 times. Wonderful. Go forth and science the shit out of it. I don't know what else to say. But when you get into, well, hold on, but spiders, yeah, spiders can fly on electricity. Wow, it's amazing. I just couldn't care less in terms of other than nature within Earth, which is fascinating, don't get me wrong, the nature of Earth, this spider and its electric arse, I couldn't care less. Who cares?
Yeah, but that was kind of the observed phenomenon for me.
Yeah, and if
No,
we were
I
what
see this
spider
thing
debate,
flying through the air.
yeah, I get it. If that was the phenomena, that's fascinating. Go forth and science. Spiders being able to fly on electricity, that's a fascinating phenomena. It just doesn't really affect the nature of my reality. It's an interesting folly. Again, I've said that twice.
Nathan, didn't university in America do that with spiders? They put them in a tank and they increased the electromagnetism and they called it tiptoeing and they witnessed the spiders doing it.
And?
Not exactly, no.
And?
There's no and to it. I'm just saying that someone has done it.
And that's really interesting. Meanwhile,
No,
hello. Meanwhile, we have been deceived at a fundamental scale about the nature of reality as a whole. Like, everything about the space we inhabit, the area of existence itself, has been lied about. Now, I understand that spiders and their electricity properties are fascinating, but I'm going to say it one more time because I've just had a big bill that I've authorised when I've got no money to pay it, and now I'm hearing about spiders' electrical arses. If this has a point relating to the nature of Earth, I'll let this continue. Otherwise, audience, am I wrong in my frustration here? Who cares about these spiders? Seriously.
Can I say why I brought it up? Is that the effect is things go up or down. We were told it was gravity. Then we've also determined can be a density relationship.
Stop.
And now we're also discovering
stop.
Could also be an electric relationship.
You're using a false comparison. When you say things, making it nice and ambiguous and vague, but then we focus on spiders and what they do. No. Things getting the effects of going up and down, scientifically validated to be medium specific in terms of the density of said medium and the density of the item travelling up or going down. But when you say things and then focus that ambiguous, applicable to everything term to spiders, that's where I've got to draw the line and say, no, I object there. No, because that isn't unilaterally true to everything what is occurring to spiders. Now, spider, like a little insect, you could say, well, you compare that to a mammal of some description, arbitrarily separated by category. Like, it doesn't matter that it's a mammal, it's just an object that's got legs and can move around, like your spider, right? Well, they don't fly into the air, do they? So how is this a reasonable comparison to things go up when you're talking about spiders? No, specifically spiders do that. That's why I'm saying I'm getting annoyed, because this doesn't relate unilaterally to the nature of existence. It just applies to that one phenomena with spiders. That's it.
It's not just spiders, though. Bees and beetles do it, don't they?
Oh, God. This is literally going to turn into what zoo debate.
No. So, Nathan, I brought up satellites, and with respect, you brought up the spider. So the satellites use a principle called electromagnetic tethering, and the spiders are simply using that same effect. It doesn't mean that the spiders generating the effect. It doesn't mean the spiders are generating the effect. They're just simply piggybacking on a known phenomena, which we use to ascend objects. And they say why a bumblebee should never be able to fly based on its wing diameter, till they determine that it's producing a certain harmonic that allows it to ascend or descend in this atmosphere. So if the effect we're studying is objects rise in some cases and sink in some cases based on the medium, we can also say objects rise or fall based on this principle, which is a known effect in science. So I also don't want it to be a zoo.
That are doing it. It's not any stuff.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's not
just
unilaterally
these insects that are able.
Yeah, that's what I tried to make a moment ago, Rams, is my point. It's not unilaterally applicable. You want to substitute egg for almost anything. You can. You want to substitute you can even cross phase in terms of what you're describing and how it's applicable. change the phase completely from a gas to a liquid. Yeah, this is still true. So when you're like, well, no, a couple of insects do it, fascinating. And yeah, I keep saying this, go forth and science it. Fascinating stuff. But when it comes down to, well, now let's substitute in the original claim of gravity versus scientific validity to relative density versus now a sideline introduction that somehow muscled its way in as the null with electrostatics because of very specific phenomena, bees and spiders, that is then generalized out with those objects. And it's like, no, how is this occurring? Why are we on this merry dance? You know, if this is a phenomena that's worthy of study, fine, study it. At this stage, other than a null substitution for a non-phenomena that wasn't being studied, and hasn't been studied as far as I'm concerned, who's showing the experiments with this electrostatic disequilibrium effect? If they are, wonderful, I'll be interested in looking at it. I'm sure there is electricity effects that I should be concerned with deeply. But at this stage, knowing that it's spiders and bees doesn't make me think this is going to fundamentally change my non-opinion of gravity, my understanding of relative density, or the nature of existence in general. It's just an interesting folly.
Can I just add to that folly? I understand the point with regards to spiders and the like. So whoever was making this point was linking it to tether propulsion in terms of systems. Well, this isn't an Earth-based technology. It's not demonstrated on Earth, and it's had the massive input of $1.9 million, which probably tells you a lot about whether it even works. But the place in which it supposedly works is hanging off of satellites in the vacuum of space. So I'm not a little confused as to the validation that we've got this technology that does this, and that's supported by bees. I think spiders. I think spiders is the best thing. The rest of it, as far as I can see, is look, it's not real. It's maths claiming to be happening on satellites in space. So I have real doubt as to this technology being genuine and used as well.
It
So
feels
I
like a
didn't
bit of
say
an
in
ether
space.
argument.
No, it's on weather balloons up in the high stratospheric layers. So not necessarily
He also
floating
said
in the
airplanes as well
What's the stratosphere?
when they touch down.
up in the stratosphere.
Have you got a link for this? I'm not seeing that anywhere. It's just talking, look, interstellar travel. Nothing about weather balloons. Space charge limits.
Well, don't assume he hasn't. What have you got, Solar?
That's what I'm asking. Could I have have you got a link for me to have a read about it? I'm not saying there isn't any. I'm saying I can't see anything
the
here.
search. So I got it wrong. In the electromagnetic field, they call it electrodynamic tethering. Electrodynamic.
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
sure
what
if
I had on the
wires,
screen. Electrodynamic tethers, EDTs.
which operate on electromagnetic principles as generators by converting their kinetic energy to electric energy.
Yeah. From
There was a
satellites,
test
though,
where
not weather
someone took
balloons.
beetle wings and he created a craft out of the beetle wings.
That's Russian dodgy stuff. That's got nothing to do with it. The point I'm just trying to clarify is what I'm reading is it says a tether satellite. It's not got mention of weather balloons or any application with weather balloons. It's just talking about satellites. That's what I'm doing. If you've got something on it, that would have some real data, wouldn't it? Weather balloons, but they're. So I'd just like to have a read of that. If you could link me up with where you've got this from, because the bits I can see are just talking about satellites in the and how the electromagnetic field of the ball Earth is what they move across to adjust their orbits. What it's saying.
There's a little video in the mainstream chat, in the main chat there. It shows the positive electrostatic force as an effect on helium balloons. You can check that out for yourself. It's right there in the main chat.
Yeah, I can rub a balloon on my jumper and demonstrate that.
Yeah. Why don't you take a look at the video and then have something to say?
Well, why
Can I
don't you
ask what it's
explain your
proving,
point
though? What is
instead
it
of me
proving?
having to go and look at the video and figure out what the point is you're making? It's not my claim.
Okay. He puts a positive charge on the balloons, and they sink. He
Yeah.
takes it off. What's the negative charge? They rise. That's simple.
And that means
electrostatics have an effect on things, and we're figuring out what they have an effect on. And there's one in the main chat if you want to look at it.
I rub it with my jumper and give it an opposite charge to the wall, it will stick to the wall.
You're talking about a helium balloon, right?
Yeah.
You're making the helium balloon go down with a positive electrostatic charge. You not get this. And then when you release the charge back to negative, it floats back up. You get that? You understand what I'm saying?
Yes. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, well, I guess
This description makes sense. Hold on. Your description makes sense. Hold on. Don't get annoyed.
Relax.
Okay, hello.
Relax.
Yeah. Yeah, your description does make sense. You're describing how you can induce an electrostatic force and cause things to move up and down. Seems perfectly reasonable. And very interesting.
Well, could you then perhaps do that to a rock that's on a scale and see if the weight changes?
Who knows? Depends on the kind of rock. There's a lot to this.
Why does it?
A lot of
Why
things
does it
are
depend?
because there's a lot of things that are more susceptible to static electricity than others. Some things are tougher.
So this
you might find a rock you might be able to make float. I don't know.
But this is why how you design an experiment is crucial. So the same way that an egg in a container of liquid is considering the relationship of the density or the medium around the egg, but you wouldn't necessarily construct that same experiment if you were simply wanting to do an electrostatic force, in the same way that you wouldn't say prove Einsteinian gravity, but you have to start with the Cavendish experiment, because the experiment will be designed to isolate variables to a point where a single variable can be analyzed. So taking a helium balloon, which is very buoyant and wanting to rise, and getting it to a point where it's now stationary with whatever mass is connected to it, and then causing either up or down movement, which is what we call gravity, which is why people think there's such a force as a buoyant or dense force governed by the big G in the equation, is the movement of up and down. So if we found another variable, then it just shows that the other one is not an independent variable for up and down movement. It's now it's just one of the dependent variables.
Dependent variables of the effect.
Okay, sorry, control variables. The effect is the rising or falling or deliberately causing that upward or downward motion or upward or downward acceleration.
And nobody would contest that. In the same way, when you boil a bit of water, right, you hold the pressure constant because it does have an effect on it. Yeah? And likewise, in general terms, you're never going to reach the point where you can get the water to just boil by itself by those effects. Naturally, you could induce them by changing the pressure massively, but obviously then you would say, well, the pressure is part of it, and it is. But when you're controlling to see what you can cause it in the same way you witnessed it in nature, so you witness a hot spring, what causes it to boil? Well, the heat is the predominant thing in that scenario at that pressure at sea level. Now, that's not to say that you can't have a varying effect by having one of the control variables influence the test, but it's not the overriding cause. In that instance, you apply heat to the water and it boils. Does that mean that pressure doesn't have any effect on it because it's held constant in that experiment? No, you can still vary it. it's still directly proportional to the pressure in terms of what temperature it will boil at, which you'll see the effect actually occurring. So yeah, it's directly linked. Now, in terms of experimental validity, about the 5th time I've said this, if you want to go forth in science, the electrostatic effects on whatever you're controlling it with in that scenario, let's just stick with the egg and salt water example. You want to say, okay, well, egg in salt water, I can actually have an influence over it, a little bit, with the amount of electricity that I pump through it. And you go, okay, that's cool. So we've got a tiny, tiny, tiny amount, according to you guys, in the air. So it's having a tiny, let's say, negligible effect on the egg when you vary the medium and its density. Okay, I will accept, notwithstanding that there is a tiny, negligible effect from the electricity claimed to be in the air that is having seemingly no effect, varied or otherwise, because there's no high voltage wires run through the damn thing. So it's not overall affecting whether or not the egg moves up or down when it plops out of a chicken and rolls into some water. You know, the density of the water that it plops into may have an effect, though, and that is universally true throughout whatever phase of whatever medium of whatever thing is passing through whatever always. You know, and that I can show with an experiment. Now, that doesn't mean the control variables can't have an influence. They can. That's why you hold them constant, so that you're not varying the pressure. You're not trying to heat up the water whilst elevating yourself in a bloody hot air balloon as you do it, because you might find that has an influence on the test. The overall independent variable isn't independent anymore and you haven't got empiricism. That could be a bit of a problem. That's why you hold these things constant. Anyway, I've kept this live show going just to get that little naggy rant out of the way. But with that, I am going to say, while I clear my throat, let's do that first. If you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Programming Streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you. Smash the Super Chat PayPal link, as I've just had a 300 quid bill that I've authorised while I was on the live show. So yeah, please smash the PayPal link. It would be greatly appreciated. Liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, and all that good stuff. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on a premiering stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!
Going on, guys?
Right, just explain.
It's all crap. Everything's crap at the moment, Chocolate. Everything's breaking, and I'm uber poor. I've had
what's going on with your thing over there?
Right, the first thing I found out this morning, which pissed me off royally, you know, I've had an amp that's been in repair for over a year. Hold on a sec. The guy contacted me. I've been chasing him. And he's like, I don't normally admit defeat, but I just cannot seem to get this amp fixed. I'm like, yeah, no shit, it's been over a year. But I'm like, oh, well, I just thought he was, you know, lagging behind. And then he sort of gave me a hint at how long he'd spent on it without success. So it's gone from this amp, me wanting it back because I use it. It's nothing to do with the show. It means I can listen to movies and shit. So it's not something that I can like e-beg justifiably for. But it's just another expense that's a personal expense. But I want it fixed. And anyway, after I hear him saying basically, I don't think I can fix that, it's suddenly just a hunk of metal that, you know, maybe 10 years ago had a retail price of about £7,000. Not a cheap piece of equipment. Now, don't get me wrong, I was working for the company that made it when I got it, so I certainly didn't pay that for it. But that's what it's worth at retail value, probably several £1,000s second hand. But not working, it's a paperweight. It's not worth anything. So I'm like, oh, so while I was considering selling it, or at the very least getting it back and actually using the damn thing again, now it's just a hunk of junk that I can't even turn into money if I wanted to. So in the back of my mind, I'm contemplating turning it into money in case this projector, which has already yielded a 300 quid bill, they might get further down the line and go, actually, we can't fix the damn thing. That's worst case scenario still. You know, admittedly, they've just got it out of the box and gone, it's got a high lamp life. You go, okay, yeah, I knew that. So it does make sense to do that. But by the same token, you've not actually told me what you've fixed yet. And they might come back and go, we can't. So in which case, I've got to presumably fork out an absolute shed ton to replace the projector, which does happen with projectors. I've had other projectors that have lasted this limited amount of time, believe it or not. They don't last. But then it would be on the very low side in terms of longevity, I've got to be honest. Crap, man, it's not even 2 years old. But all this stress, it's all just, you know, as I said to Owen in the pre-show, just resolvable with money, which I haven't got. Anyway, that's just life, tough crap. First world problems in reality. But my first world problems directly connect to how well the show runs. So that's frustrating. Anyway, moan over.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Maybe you need to try someone else with the amp repair. Maybe some fresh eyes might.
No, not at all. I know what the amp is, so hold on. I've got a real throb in my throat today. It's because I've actually bitten my tongue. My kid jumped up underneath my chin and messed up my mouth. So I've got a slight lisp now.
That's the worst.
Ouch.
Anyway.
No, the worst is when they kick you in the balls with them white shoes.
They do that. They do that every other day, Neil. There's not every other day because they're both girls, so they don't really get it. But there's not a day, or every other day they stamp on or kick me in the nuts. So if you're a Nathan Oakley hater, take solace in the fact that every other day I'm getting kicked in the balls because I am.
Yes,
You
I
know
had two
there's
daughters too.
You know there's protection for that, right?
What, babysitters and nurseries and stuff?
No, like a tuck, the ball protector. You could put it on under your pants.
Okay, thanks for that,
cricket
Owie.
box.
Yes, I'll take your cup advice under advisement also. Anyway, I'm doing something that I hate doing on my own show. You know, should all be upbeat and positive and not necessarily about my financial woes. But there we go. We're in the after show, and you did ask Chocolate, and it's just everything all at once. It always seems to be the case that entropy will bite you right at the time when you just least want it to. Everything breaks always at the same time. There we go.
Yeah, bad luck likes company. One thing goes wrong, then everything all simultaneously usually starts happening. I had a moment like that on Sunday, but I got out of it just fine.
Just to address Discord, yeah, I think it's Zach's video. Somebody was pointing out where he's got a load of helium balloons.
That was good times we did that video. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Zach. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was
Zach.
there when he was doing it in Cammy's kitchen. So yeah, it's a couple of years old, a year or so old, isn't it? And if you do,
August 27, 2019. Yes.
Oh, it's even older. Bloody hell, time does fly. The point is, what's it demonstrating? It's demonstrating that if you link a load of helium balloons up with an electric cable to a Van de Graaff and turn it on, they go down.
That's nice.
That's how it stayed that level of development for 2 years.
And that's great.
But we're making the phenomena in the apparatus, aren't we?
What it sounds like.
Yeah, and it sounds like this effect, which there is a certain amount of inducible in our, let's use the word atmosphere, and that is taken advantage of by certain creatures. Because there is a small effect that can be taken advantage of, and you can elaborate on that effect, pump up the volume, pump up the amperage, if you will, and show that effect with things that are bigger or different or whatever, in this case helium balloons. And all of that's great. You know, that's all wonderful. But generally speaking, in nature, you know, when an apple falls from a tree, which is really what we're talking about, there is a very specific reason why it will go to the ground. Because it's more dense than the medium that it's in. That's it.
Let me jump in. Okay, that's right. Okay, let's say that's a phenomenon, and we looked at its buoyancy and density, but now we're looking for controlled variables, and that's what he was doing.
Okay. But
You've
when you
said
say
this a
control
couple of
variables,
times.
are you looking for things to keep constant so as to not affect the test when you establish, as we have done, that the medium
Right, but
is what's causing this?
and now it's flipped to check for other variables. Like you can't know if it's a variable unless you like manipulate it, right? You can't have it controlled. Like you have to manipulate it, and then you say, okay, we know this affects it. Now let's control it. So before you can even say it's a controlled variable, you have to know it's a manipulatable thing. And we're looking to see if electricity is something that needs to be controlled for by manipulating it. Follow me?
Anthony,
you've got the point that you've got this observed voltage change with altitude. Yeah, so that's surely the thing. But therefore, you need to have altitude change, and then see if it's a bit like with water boiling at altitude. Yeah, now it's noted there's a change at altitude. What's the cause that the altitude's affecting is air pressure. Now, so it would seem to me that you need to do a world tour with your egg and take it to different altitudes if that's what you're trying to link, or because it just seems wholly artificial and not representative of any natural phenomena that you're going to get in, be able to observe or try to link this to. And this is part of the backwards nature. You're trying to vary things just randomly. Frankly, it's not linked to something where you've got I can see a connection between A and B. You're just saying I've seen a connection between density and buoyancy, and in that experiment, all these other things were constant. Let's try varying them, and it just seems a little haphazard. It doesn't seem to have a direction. It's supported by something that's not linked to it, which is, like I said, the preliminary point that we have a variation in voltage at different altitudes.
Can I answer this directly? Didn't Anthony use electricity to try to do it and it didn't work?
Did he? That's new on me.
Yeah, he hooked it up to a battery.
He hooked it up to a battery?
Yeah.
Really? Sorry, talk me through this.
Yeah, ages ago. I don't pay attention to it because it's daft. But he said they were on about it, so I've jacked it up. I'm sure it was a car battery. He jacked it up.
When you say he connected it up, right? What did he do? Did he literally just put the positive terminal in one side and the negative in the other?
I think that's about the best guess I've got. Yeah, I didn't follow much detail other than did it work? No. Right. Okay. Yeah.
Wait, he did that? Yeah, I want to see that.
I hope he did it in a white lab coat.
That sounds like a fun experiment.
I hope it was tongue in cheek.
This was coming.
Guys, don't jump to conclusions. Like when we put a few spoons of salt, it didn't lift the egg up either. Like maybe we should look at it more carefully before we just jump to conclusions and start clapping.
Yeah, it did.
You didn't change it then?
Yeah, it did lift up the egg.
Hold on. No. Right.
A little bit also lifts up.
No,
that's fine. That's fine.
I did
No, it's
I'm
fine.
talking about something I did in Discord on webcam. Talking about something else.
You're right. In terms of, you're saying if it was comparable to the water boiling, right? Well, I added a bit of heat and it didn't boil. Well, actually, yeah, it did. But at a level that you just didn't notice. And the same applies with the egg movement. Yeah, it did move. You couldn't see it at that level. It wasn't dramatic, but yes, it did.
And if it was like pressing it at the to the bottom or something, and then you add a little salt, then it's just gonna press less to the bottom, not enough to actually, to break free from the bottom, but it's still gonna be less of a pressure because a little bit of salt introduction is gonna change the average density of the medium.
Exactly.
Could you
That
explain
will
how
result
he
in
did
a
this?
change.
Exactly.
Could you explain how Riley did this? Anybody that's seen this?
I believe he just introduced an electrical charge into the medium, and it didn't do anything. And
Was the egg in the middle, or at the top, or at the bottom?
It didn't do anything.
Where was the egg? I'm asking for details.
It didn't do anything, but where was the egg? Where was the egg when it didn't do anything?
Is there a link to this?
I want to
that
know
we
the
can
start.
see
I
this?
still want the details of it. What's wrong?
Hold on, this is getting more and more farcical. Hold on. Now we've not only got no, the egg didn't do anything. We now got where was the egg when it wasn't doing anything? Can I see this video of this egg doing nothing?
You guys need some girlfriends.
Words.
Now learn where the egg was behind the scenes.
Guys, come on. Stay on point.
Link would be
Did you have a voltmeter to know that you were sending
Sleeping Warrior on. I'll be right back.
I've just texted him, Tom.
Link the video too.
Did you pass an electric current through your egg? And can you join? Give him a ring.
I'm not gonna
And
pass.
can you
electric
prove how
current to
much
my-
and that it actually went through?
Yeah,
Guys,
what we'll get is we'll get the video.
Is this not a tone of resisting and mockery?
No, not at all.
No.
Sounds like you got a
Four
tone of
times.
defense.
I've said go forth and science
Oh,
this.
It's offense,
Shut-
Neil. I apologize for that.
I'm
You
saying
got a
it's,
tone of defense, yes.
No, it's
Say-
called offense.
saying it's
Okay.
Don't get your egg stuck on the fence.
No, you're getting very defensive,
Wait,
not
can-
offense.
can I- can I
You're
just
acting
No,
ask a clarifying
offense as in
question?
offended.
You did it.
Calm down, Neil. Offense
Can
as
I
in
just ask
offended.
a clarifying question?
Go ahead, chocolate.
Come on.
None of this is coming with any globe claim, is it?
No.
We're studying the nature of Earth. Just
What's
the-
happening is no. Let's
I
just
was just asking.
hello. Let's just clarify what's happening for chocolate. Original claim, original question. The point that we basically hit the anchors in terms of the housekeeping. Any scientific evidence of gravity, right? So then you have to logically establish what that is, and there is no phenomena to be studied, right? But a phenomena that can be studied is some things go up, some things go down, some things remain in equilibrium. Yeah? And then you can study that, because that is something you can actually observe occurring. Further to that, establishing with scientific validity that the variation of the medium that the item is in will cause its directionality or a vector to be produced if you vary it. Now, further to that, the null, which would be if you vary the density of the medium, no vector will be induced, no directionality will be induced. That's the null. That gets substituted with, well, what is actually the null is now going to be a control that could also be the cause. Therefore, there's not just one independent variable, because the null, i.e., it's not electricity causing it, because that's held constant, but that could also be the cause. Therefore, there's then a third step into, well, what is this actually a phenomena again? Well, yeah, we see spiders and we see bees doing it. Therefore, this is a phenomena that's going to be things moving up and down as the secondary actual observed phenomena turned into a justification for claiming that electricity is the overriding force that gives people and things a directional vector if they're moving up or down. But with also one more thing strapped onto the end of that, which is an assertion that there's a downward bias, which there isn't.
Yeah.
How does changing the control into an independent variable in another experiment negate that independent variable being that?
Exactly.
In the first experiment?
Yeah, go forth and science it, hold the
Right.
density completely constant, and then just have the IV of the electricity. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so let's see this video. I'm looking at his channel right now, Sleeping Warrior, and looks like this is on his new channel. So was this on his old channel and it's deleted? Because
Possibly.
I haven't been able to
I
spot
didn't
it
even
now.
see it, right? Just so I don't know.
No, that was like from a while back ago. It doesn't have that many. It goes back only 7 months so far.
Yeah, indeed. It may be on his old channel. I wasn't actually aware of him, tongue in cheek or otherwise, running or attempting to run electricity through a salt solution with an egg in it. I didn't know that had happened.
Just tried searching density egg experiment. Surely it'll come up.
Don't call me Shirley.
I don't think you've ever done a video on it. I'm just.
Maybe not. The results may shock you all.
Wow.
But yeah, just for comparison, I'm just made this example. I'm now going to make it for the second time. In the same way as you hold the pressure constant when you're boiling a bit of water to find that heat causes it, yeah? That is not to say that if you held the heat constant and then varied the pressure within the realms of what you can experience naturally, that you would induce the effect. Because it's not the primary cause of that effect. It has an influence on it, hence it's controlled, so that it doesn't have any influence on what you're varying to see if it causes it, in this case, heat. Yes, pressure will have an influence. That's why you keep it constant. And maybe, let's suppose that there's a variation you can induce in the effect we're observing and studying. Some things go up, some things go down, some things remain neutral. Well, maybe when all of the density of the medium is held constant, you can cause a variation by varying the electricity. So go forth and science it.
Yeah, that's the only thing I heard that I was like, I'm not sure, because when I just said, then that independent variable is no longer that. Well, no, in that experiment still is that, and it still causes your dependent variable. But if you have another experiment, you want to do something else, where you use the control as the independent, then yeah, that makes sense. But that doesn't negate this experiment with this independent variable actually being the cause of the dependent variable.
Yeah.
I don't think I said that. Did I say it negates?
No.
I don't think I said it negates.
You kind of, you didn't use that word. You kind of said it. Well, it's no longer the independent variable. That's what I heard.
You implied that the salt didn't change anything.
Right. We're not saying that they are mutually exclusive either. Likewise, if you're studying plant growth and you vary soil, you're not going to say the cause of the plant growth soil, because that's too limited. But yes, it will have a direct cause and effect relationship if you remove it. It definitely needs it. It's definitely part of the equation if you want to look at it as a whole. That's why you end up with multiple experiments lending themselves to scientific theory. That's why theories are so powerful, because they're basing their descriptions after the fact on scientific validity. That's where you get theories from. But you're going to need multiples thereof. If you look at light, the list of experimentation is endless. It's a non-stop stream of experiments, a couple of which we discussed in the pre-show, i.e. double slit. Well, that is just one on a massive journey to try and, excuse the pun, enlighten humanity on what these effects are caused by and how, as a whole, they interact together. Now, yeah, you've got to really limit things down to the base level in order to study these things with any sort of degree of accuracy and have your assertions make any sense. But, working outside the conventions used to describe the effect and the cause thereof when experimented on, that's a danger that happens. There's all sorts of quantum nonsense out there. Most of it loosely based on, some of the validity that quantum experimentation has given us, but then there's all sorts of nonsense that's just strapped on with the words. In other words, as much as we're looking to show people how Einsteinian nonsense has been superseded by quantum mechanics, it doesn't mean to say that the exact same charlatanism won't exist within the scientific community going forth with quantum mechanics as the established understanding and truth. It is, it does, it will in the future. That will still be the case also. But my point was, sorry, I lost track of my point. So when you're looking at light, you're not going to get one single experiment and say that's the cause of light, for example. You're going to study an aspect of light. Now, an aspect of the phenomena we describe with things going up, things going down, things remaining neutral. If you want to go even further into the cause of relative density disequilibrium, you'll end up at the second law of thermodynamics describing how it occurs. You suddenly slap your own forehead and go, now we're into the realms of trying to figure out the cause of entropy when you try and describe the effect when it's varied with the density of the medium in the example with the egg. Well, suddenly you're into trying to find out the cause of that, and that's where you hit the brick wall.
I think I understand one of the points being made with the control variable, and I'll use like phase changes as an example, because you can induce a phase change by varying the pressure, but the cause is still temperature. It just, the control variable is affecting the cause. So, and that pressure isn't the cause of phase changes, because you can press on water all day long and it won't create ice. you know, there's aspects to this that have logic included. It's just not just empirical by nature.
Sure, that's why I said it's not unilateral, or whatever word I used previously. No, but that might affect a different phase when you apply pressure, or electrostatic effects might be influential on certain dense objects in certain mediums. Now, you can example that in a very specific setup, man-made or otherwise, with Zach's example. In other words, you can absolutely show that. But in terms of it just being universally true, well, no. You can show that there is an influence that can be, under certain circumstances, taken advantage of by nature. Now, when you get that specific, that becomes the phenomena that you're studying, as opposed to the phenomena of things go up, things go down, things remain neutral. You're getting much more hyper-specific in terms of a specific phenomena that's occurring within nature. And when you get to that stage, I say, well, what's the point of this now? We're no longer talking about something that is used by our opponents, called gravity, and asserted to be a downward vector, universally true always, and then segued by pointing out that the phenomena itself negates that. Not everything goes down. And then us, it is flat earthers that do this. Maybe there's other groups that do it also, that then reintroduce a downward bias for no reason whatsoever. Genuinely, to this day, I don't understand why people on the flat earth side of the argument want a downward bias when there isn't one. I don't get it. I really don't get it.
I'd like to just clarify for myself that I'm not looking for any kind of downward bias. That's not what I'm into looking at this at all about. Things are floating, things are being brought down. Just trying to understand the electricity in the air, that's all.
No, that's cool. And every time somebody postulates it in that manner, I say it's fascinating. And at that stage, when described that way, you're not withstanding the actual phenomena that occurs. And you go, fine, this is fascinating. But then when you go, well, no, what's been described formally as gravity and misascribed as a downward vector that's always in effect, I'm going to keep that bit. Now, that does occur, and you can't deny it, and I'm not trying to say that that's you, Harp.
So we can say it's everybody but Harp.
I'm not speaking very bit. I'm stereotyping some of our opponents who will remain nameless in this example. There are plenty of people that cause, you included, Neil, to say this is the next thing that we need to concern ourselves with, when it's a small faction of our own side that want to retain a downward bias.
Okay. It's going to be a problem soon.
You say, there you go. Not a problem. We can just discuss it logically like we are now. We're reasonable people. There's no problem. It's only a problem when the subject gets so hyper-specific on a phenomena that's nothing to do generally with the nature of reality. An aspect that may or may not be influential on relative density is kind of it's just too far off the beaten track for me when it's spiders or bumblebees.
I'd like to make a comment about the you can't get a solid without how did you say it about pressure is not the only factor on creating a solid. I just posted the diagram for phase change, and if you have enough pressure, you can actually create a solid because there won't be enough movement between the particles, but it would ultimately virtually be a solid even though at high temperature. But the pressure has to be very great to cause that.
I feel like I have
You
a
guys
heavy
understand, or
intro,
do you hear
Paul.
me?
What's up, man?
Yeah, I think everyone's just processing
what's up, man?
processing what you said, Paul. That's all.
Yeah. So if you have enough pressure, you just reduce the distance between the molecules, and ultimately becomes a solid if there's enough pressure.
Who would ever thought of proportionality could cause so much trouble?
Are you sure about that? So in the same way you can have gas display liquid-like behaviours, if you remove all the gaps between it, essentially will move and flow similar to a liquid, but it's still a gas. It's just got all the gaps removed. But that doesn't make it a liquid. It's still gaseous. The phase is still a gas.
Well, I mean, I guess this needs to be more specific. What's the difference between gas, liquid, and solid? I mean, at the molecular level, because that's the only way you can define it.
Well, it's defined at the intermolecular level, isn't it?
Well, what does that mean? What do you mean by intermolecular level?
Whether it has a weak, strong, or no bonds.
Well, the bonds are never changing, but it's the amount of kinetic energy that will cause those bonds to break, to cause like the transition from a liquid to a gas, or even if you look at that diagram I posted, I put it in Discord and in Master B, you can actually have sublimation, which is basically the molecules vibrate loose and go straight from a gas or solid to a gas. So you can actually have a immediate transition without even a liquid state in between. So it's really about how closely tight are the molecules.
Right, so it's not about the molecules, it's about the bonds of the molecules, right?
No, the bonds are always the same. Yeah, go ahead, Adam. You might have a better take on this than me.
There are no bonds between them when they're a gas. They're independent. When they're in liquid, there are certain intermolecular bonds that are keeping them held together. Water's a good example. And then when they're in a solid, they tend to sit within a crystalline lattice. So they're much more rigid. And different things, metals, liquids, and different solids exhibit different strength with those bonds. But if we're talking about with a gas, no, they're individually acting on their own.
It's even got it labelled. It's even got it labelled in your diagram. I've got it up, Paul. So it's got it labels it as the triple point, right?
The triple point. Oh.
But there's no overlap.
Go ahead.
The point is, these are all very much distinct sections, right? You've got your vapor section, you've got your liquid section, you've got your solid section. And while there is a triple point, there's not like a center section where, you know, it's kind of a married bachelor to say that it has and has not got intermolecular bonds when it's at a certain point, because it either has or it has not. If it has got intermolecular bonds, it's a liquid. Unless, of course, it's got a crystalline structure like Adam detailed. But for this example, it either has got the bonds, liquid, or it hasn't. It's vapor. Now, yeah, you can squash it right down, but it's still vapor. Still gas.
But if you look at the top of the solid, the blue part, if you look, there's the temperatures on, let's see, on the, which side? Okay. Oh, temperatures on the top, or no, I meant, the temperature's on the bottom, sorry. And then the pressure is on the left. So if you look at the top of the blue, you can have like really high pressure or really high temperature, I'm sorry, with a real high pressure, and it's a solid. It's indicated as a solid.
Yeah, these things are intrinsically linked. I agree. But, you know, at a certain pressure and temperature, you'll have it at a certain phase. And that's, yeah, like Adam and I've gone over in the live show with your boiling water experiment example. Yeah, you can directly influence it.
What's the specific point you're making there with regards to?
Well, basically, I mean, I guess I would. I guess I'm using the wrong word as bond. Maybe the attraction between the molecules is always the same, but it's the amount of kinetic energy that would determine.
Whoa there, cowboy. Attraction? What attraction is that then?
Well, the bonds, like,
okay.
Usually, I'm not saying
Stop.
I'm not saying the gravity.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah, the intermolecular bonds, the attraction in that regard. So we're definitely talking about liquid or solid then.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Why does it, like when you reduce the temperature of a substance, especially water is what we're talking about, that it seems like they coalesce and come together. It's the bonds between the atoms. But those bonds, like if you put enough kinetic energy, they do break. But what caused them to go together is when you reduce the kinetic energy between them, and they come together and form a first state would be typically a liquid, and then the final stage when the kinetic energy drops to the point where it becomes a solid.
Don't forget about the plasmatic state. You don't have that on your chart.
That's not even part of the discussion. That's a fourth phase of matter, and we get that, but that's not the argument, the discussion we're having.
Yeah, just pretend it's down here somewhere off the bottom right of vapor.
Yeah,
But
so
there
yeah,
are
it's another
formulas to define it.
The only point I'm making is, I guess it's what. The only point I'm making is I think it's the amount of space and movement between the particles that determines whether it's a gas, liquid, or solid.
Yeah, that's the
Oh,
pressure.
that's what they show us when you see those pictures of the.
Hold on. Yeah. The amount you're talking about Boyle's law now in terms of the proportionality, but that is the pressure. What you've just described is the pressure. That is pressure. How much of it is varied directly between how much space and how much gaps there are between all those particles, right? Well, that's you're just describing pressure.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
I think he's sounds like he's describing mass to me.
I'm not talking about that. Again, don't red herring this discussion. Don't do it in another direction. The only point I'm making is I think the determining factor is how much movement, how much how close the particles are to one another.
Yeah.
Whether it's a gas
Let me just say it once more. Hold on. Let me just say it once more. Yeah, it's directly labelled on both axes, right? Your pressure.
Well, you got the distance between the atoms within the molecular structure, the volume between those, and then you got the volume between the molecules, which defines the substance itself and the state it's in.
Sure.
I just use the graph for you just to describe what Nathan's doing. If you look at near the middle at the bottom, it says 0 degrees Celsius. So if we just follow that red line up, as we go up the red line, you can see that the pressure is increasing on this. And it's at the point where it equals 1 kilopascal up that you get a phase change. Because the pressure's so much, they're so close together, even though the temperature's the same. Yeah, and it's the same if you follow up at the 100 degrees. You can affect, look. Do you see how the two relationships are working? So when Nathan's describing the intermolecular spaces, that's what the pressure is, isn't it? If we reduce the volume, keep the same number of molecules, reduce the volume, then the space they've got to occupy is reduced. So that will increase the pressure, yeah, to the point that we can induce a phase change in the liquid at a different temperature by varying the pressure. It's just like boiling water, yeah. So if we go up out and then reduce the air pressure, the water will boil faster. There's less impedance. There's more space, so it boils faster.
Perfect. Can I just add one thing to that? Now, there may come a time where this graph for the disequilibrium, equilibrium, or disequilibrium in the opposite vector is shown with a graph that has the density along the bottom and has the amount of electricity along one side. And you might find that there's a variance in terms of, how dense being presumably the bigger scale difference and how much electrical energy or whatever it is that's going to be qualified along the other axis. That may be the case at some stage. Yeah? Now, more power to the people who come up with that and can qualify it and describe it and give a convention to it so that it's nice and understandable and easy enough to disseminate to others, and the reasons why relationships and proportionality of those relationships when it comes to electrostatic forces and relative density. But for the now, we've just got speculation. That's it. And I would love to see it go forward. I really, really would. It's fascinating. But it doesn't in any way address the bullshit nonsense of bending space-time or mass attracting mass. It doesn't in any way lend credence to the idea that is postulated, not necessarily by people here and now, that there is a downward bias when there isn't. So those are the reasons why it's being discussed. And when we get to this sort of nitty-gritty of what is fairly basic and experienced daily, right? Phase changes, solid, liquid, and gas. It is an interesting subject. But relative density, its link with a potential variant, which is held constant when you're doing an experiment to show that effect and describe it with causal attributes. And it doesn't mean that there's not other things that will have an influence on it and be plottable and how much of an influence they may have. Now, even with the very limited knowledge I have at this stage about the electromagnetic forces that are being claimed, they seem negligible to me. Now, if anybody can at this stage say, no, these are seriously powerful things, then feel free to show me that. But as it stands, I see it as negligible. However, fundamentally, the relative density seems to be unilateral across everything, regardless of phase. So, to me, that's a done deal. The speculation currently held about electrostatic forces may bear some fruit at some stage, and I hope it does. But it's not unaddressed to gravity. It doesn't give us a downward bias, and it doesn't substitute a null for if varying the density, then no effect being observed. It's just not going to happen. That's where I'm going to stick my heels in the ground every time it comes up as a subject.
Well, it's better than that, Nathan, because when Brian's logic debated Whitsitt even said it's a very negligible, very small amount of anything, but the density is the majority of it. And that came out of Whitsitt's mouth as he's yielding the debate to Brian.
Jolly good.
No, but the entire point of supposed electrostatics being involved, right? What the suggestion was that it is the cause of the directionality of the relative density. That's kind of the original reason why they brought it in there. That's what Bob himself says. Like, I think something causes the directions to be the way it is, and that's the electrostatics, right? So he's kind of like putting it right behind relative density as to what makes it work the way it does. And that's the part that's really debate. That's the part that's really there's no actual evidence of that part.
We're all getting out of our element at this stage.
Yeah, you think it has to be quantifiable then if it plays some part, right? If he's like it's negligible, but there's it plays a role. Isn't that based on what effect it's causing? And in order for you, what effect it's causing, you would have to be able to manipulate it in some way, to measure it in some way, the change, the difference.
I see.
Where's that at?
I see it as a minor inconvenience and insignificant detail on a journey. It's a guy running a 400-meter sprint and then stepping in a bit of dog shit. It really isn't actually the race. It's not part of the race. It's not part of the rules. But it's something you got to deal with. Got to press on. Who's causing that feedback in Discord?
The whole ordeal with with electrostatics versus relative density is that Bob thinks that it has a backdrop role for relative density, but in order for that to be able to be a possibility, it must undergo certain traits, and that would be immeasurability. You wouldn't be able to measure it. It would have to have unlimited reach, like every part of the realm, even where we can't go, would have to be almost like a field, a universally present field, in order to achieve that backdrop trait that Bob thinks it has in relation to relative density. And all these elements are completely missing. Like, they're not there. Electrostatics is absolutely not a backdrop cause for relative density to work the way it does, because electrostatics on its own contradict on 4 critical points. They completely are the opposite of what it should be in order to fulfill that function.
Go on, whoever it was from Discord. Someone had their mic wide open trying to get a word in.
Maybe he went fishing.
Maybe.
Hold on, I just underwater and I plugged something in, and gee, it made my hair stand up.
It's like having a hey, Eli, good to hear you.
There's no need.
Yeah, it's like having a little scar on your body that the naked eye can't see. So you got to get a magnifying glass on it, and it's really small. And you got to really strain to find it. But when you do, you say, "Oh, there it is," and then attributing the rest of the body somehow to that one little scar that's insignificant, and saying that little scar is the mass of, it runs the 99.9999999% of the rest of the body. I mean, this is how silly this is. When they say it's insignificant and it doesn't amount to much, and it's very little limited power to it. And then at the same time, Whitsitt says, well, the density is the bigger part of it. That's the main part. And no one's arguing that. I mean, just listen to that debate. It was a train wreck.
Yeah, but simultaneously it underpins everything and is ultimately the overall overriding cause of it all. So, it's kind of double speak in that regard. Your cut analogy is a good analogy. It's like the guy's a computer programmer who's been sent a problem with some code that doesn't quite function properly, causes crashes, and while he can't figure out the issue, the person who's studying him says, well, his chair's a bit old. That's definitely having an influence. It's only a minor influence, but ultimately it's the overall overriding most important influence on everything this man does.
Yes, yeah. Of course, because it's part of posture and you can't postulate without it.
He couldn't be sat at the desk without the chair, so ultimately let's inquire about the science of the chair and focus on that more than anything that he's doing in the programming and his ability as a programmer and the actual problem at hand. And when he solved the problem, after he solved the problem, made it all work without crashing, someone comes along and says, so really what we need to do is study how good the chair was. I mean, because how good that chair is has a direct influence on how well he solved that problem. And it is influential on it. You can show how it influenced him. And that is directly showable in this extreme example. You're like, what? Yeah, okay. The chair had an effect on it. Okay. Yeah. But chair was held constant in him programming, wasn't it? We didn't vary the chairs throughout him doing the programming. No. But now let's start the process again and vary the chairs throughout the process.
Yes, we must have.
Yes, let's do it. Because
oh gosh.
Everyone loves my analogy so much they all want to get a piece of it.
I interrupted first, 10th man. Shut the hell up. I interrupted first, so I'm
You're a very
no
rude
need.
person,
Right.
Arvin.
Number one, right? No need. You're both talking right through each other. Number two, Neil, no need to mock whoever's doing this stuff because it's not worthy of being mocked, and there's no need to. Yet you see it as an issue, but these people are, for the most part, open-minded individuals. Yeah, there are examples where they've taken it too far and have become involved in their own dogma. But, for the most part, these are open-minded individuals. For example, who was it that was on the show? Harp. He's one of those people. And I'm sure when you mock it, personally, Neil, he will take offence to that. And why wouldn't he? It's offensive to say, your inquiry into something that's interesting and intriguing is worthy of just taking the piss out of. I don't think that's the case. I encourage people to go ahead, science it, follow this. Hopefully, it'll become fruitful, and my best of wishes go out to them rather than mocking them. That's all.
Thank you, Nathan.
Damn it! I want to get into
I said everybody except Hawk. I put a disclaimer in.
I want to get into the chair theory. Chairs have a big influence on programmers. The chair might be stinky. The chair might be uncomfortable. And the programmer doesn't have to realize that it has an influence until it's changed. So maybe he was doing that because the chair was just super dirty and all that. And he just didn't
Michael Jackson became the best dancer with more shoes. Doesn't matter.
Look,
Anyway.
Water on that plug is up underwater. Look at my hair.
Look, Eli, your camera's on.
Yeah,
camera's on here.
You're all afraid of chair theory, aren't you?
I'm trying to say something. I want you guys to understand me. That's why my camera's on.
Go on, Eli.
if you're going to investigate this electrostatic stuff, the least you could do is not beg the question. That's the least. If you beg the question, then it's pointless.
Okay, how do the hypotheses start? They start with a presupposition, right?
No, no, a presupposition.
Neil, your mic is
Before the
open.
horse. Right? So when you have a hypothesis, it's a supposition, not a
All right,
presupposition.
supposition. All right, supposition, right. Whatever.
Okay.
But then you test it, right?
Neil, stop the hammering. Stop the hammering.
All right, Arwen, it's not.
Yes.
Who the hell's building a
Stop
shed
the
back there?
hammering, Neil.
Oh, building another wood shed for us, bro? Damn.
Yes.
Right, so Elijah,
Yes,
right?
yes.
You start with a supposition. And a supposition, you what? You make an assumption of what you think is going on with the phenomena? What's causing the phenomenon, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what's your point?
That is the point. I mean, my point was don't beg the question when you're investigating electrostatics. That I started with that point. That was all. That was the only point I had.
Okay, but if the supposition is that electrostatics could be a variable, are we begging the question? Like, what are you trying to say? I'm not following what you're saying.
Like when you have the medium, right? And then you're like, well, there are other things at play. We're just going to attribute that to this thing that is immeasurable. You're begging the question.
Hold on. It is measurable. It's all in the air. Like we had Solar guy. He just talked to us. He
He's
said
trying
they
to
have
say-
the higher they go, the more they have to like.
I don't know
the more
anything
things
about.
conduct
I don't know
electricity.
anything about that.
Right. Well, you got to keep up with the flat Earth debate and show up on time then.
No, be
I don't
quiet.
know, I don't know what electrostatics has to do with.
That was not necessary.
I don't know what electrostatics has to do with geometry.
First of all,
What's
that was not
important?
necessary, Righteous. That was not
no.
necessary, Righteous. Eli's been gone for a while. That's not a good greeting. Second, a presupposition, you already have a model in your mind.
Yeah, right.
Well,
just
can I just say
that
that
measured,
what
or was
Eli,
that just a
What
calculation?
model is that?
One Adam.
Point out the model then.
Eli started with the important bit that you've got a supposition. Now, you haven't got a supposition. You've got bits of information, but you haven't got a supposition. You haven't got a supposition as in something to move forwards with, and that's the issue with regards to this topic. We've got.
Well,
I'll tell you guys we can look at, and we can, but we don't really have anything to grasp fundamentally to move forward with.
You're just butthurt because you're still religious.
Wait a second, guys.
You're just butthurt because you're still religious. That's why you're hostile towards me.
Guys,
It's
calm
okay.
down. Nathan said otherwise. Wait a second. Nathan said otherwise. If you guys can go forward for this.
No. What
you see
Nathan
nothing wrong with
said
it.
is this is the issue. And this is what I want to say earlier. I totally agree with Hart and stuff. All of this harnessing energy. I've been doing it for years. I've got magnets here with wires and stuff that I pull currents from. Yeah, from nothing. Yeah. So, but what I don't do is conflate that, right, with a downward force or try to crowbar it into. That's when I say there's no supposition there. The two things are lovely, but they're not intertwined with anything that you could suppose.
That's the word I've been fishing for all show. Conflate. That's the word. Conflation. That's what's happening. Sorry.
Okay,
Go ahead, Righteous.
I apologize, Nathan. We started with the egg, the salt, the water, and then we wanted to go from there to account for more variables to control. Is something wrong with that?
But there was no need. We found the cause of the effect.
That's not
All right,
necessarily
so
true.
hold on.
That doesn't mean
Let me reply. Come on.
Sorry.
Let me reply really quickly. Okay, so we're changing the temperature, to test water boiling, right? And we don't have to account for the pressure now?
Yeah, you should hold it
Is that
constant.
what you're saying?
No, hold it constant.
Right,
Controlled variable.
Right, but we're talking about control variables. He says we don't have to go after controlled variables and see what other variables there are to control.
Yeah.
And then experiment. We just
Yeah,
stop there at the.
yeah. Part of the methodology has a requirement for repeated experimentation, right? Systematic experimentation is the terminology they use, and that's part of the reason, because you don't know what you don't know. So, to the best of your ability, you have to hold anything that could skew the test constant. Now, you do that to the best of your ability, and there might be things that are occurring. For instance, while you're doing the test in your office, boiling some water, applying heat as your independent variable, and you don't know that the air pressure changes, you occasionally feel your ears doing something, but you don't know what that is. You haven't ever established that that's a pressure change. And each time you do the test, you notice that there is a slight variation, and you don't know what that variation in terms of the boiling point is being ascribed to. Yeah? And it's because you don't know that there's something else that's varying that was beyond your knowledge when you tried to hold everything constant, i.e. constant variables or control variables. Well, you don't know what you don't know. And in the same way, it might be the case that given a certain highly electrostatic charged field being in effect when this egg experiment is taking place, that the rate that it goes up or the rate that it goes down is altered, i.e. it changes how quickly it does it, or changes the amount of salt that needs to be added, or sugar, whatever. I'm saying that it may have an influence on it and you didn't realise that you could have had a more consistent test if you'd have been aware that something that you didn't know needed to be held constant was held constant. Now, even if this electricity or electrostatic force wasn't made aware to Anthony, he even tried to induce an effect by varying it, as far as, farcical though it may be, tongue-in-cheek though it may be. And if it has an influence in the same way a pressure will change your boiling point, it may be something that could be put on a sliding scale next to it also. And great, I'll applaud it if that's qualified with conventions put in place that can describe it to others. I'll applaud that. And people are on the cusp of being able to do it. They're the ones that will be deemed genius if they can. But as it stands, it's just speculation.
All right, let me say something. Let me say quick, Nathan. If there's too many guys entering in, then the point gets lost, the back and forth.
Well,
Nathan brought something up that I want to address.
Yeah.
That is on point. Okay, so mention by way of induction, or I forget what you said, but you're basically saying if we stumble upon it accidentally versus trying to see searching out, not just waiting for it to be by accident and noticing there's a difference, but by seeking that out. You're saying because you pointed to two differences between the two. How did you word it again?
He said you don't know what you don't know.
I'm saying that while it might have an influence on the test, i.e. the pressure variance when boiling water may have an influence on the boiling point of water. So it is altering your test to a certain degree. It won't change the cause from heat to acid content. It also won't, introduce some upward bias vector that you assume before the fact. None of those things will happen. The cause and effect relationship's been established. But there are things that you are unaware of that may have an influence, and in this case, we're saying, in terms of relative density, or an effect that has a disequilibrium and therefore induced vector, when you have that effect, there may be, and I don't disagree, a small influence dependent on the electrostatic effect in the air at the time. I don't disagree. Will it change the effect that's being causally validated is relative density? No, that will still always be the cause. And if you hold the density constant, you might be able to induce a variation in the speed of the vector change, or the amount of vector change, or the level of density required to induce the vector change, if you hold it all constant and just change the electricity. Maybe.
Okay, now my question is if you forcefully look for it, you go out of your way to look for something else, would that be considered right or wrong?
Can I address this point? Because this is why I giggled with Rayleigh sticking electrodes on the egg. When we set up an experiment, we set it up to test the hypothesis. So the experiment is very specific. Therefore, you can't take the same experiment and take something that you've considered a possible control variable and just vary that within the experiment that was set up to test a very different hypothesis. That's the point of ridicule I had. I'm not laughing at people. I don't do that, Righteous. I was giggling at the nature of the experimentation. If you're going to go and do something so detailed that you're going to suggest that electric potential within the stuff can control its relative position, then you need something a lot more precise than an experiment that's set up to show something which will be quite physical and obvious. You're detecting, as we've said from the beginning, a very subtle nuance that could possibly be there. Yeah. So it's kind of naive, frankly, to take an existing experiment and think, right, all I would have to do is keep that experiment as and change one of the controls, or not even a thing I've even controlled for. Yeah. Something that I've now suggested because of something else I've observed. I can vary that in that experiment. It's just, it's not. The experiment is there to prove your hypothesis. Yeah. And it has to be constructed to support that.
Exactly. New hypothesis is
Or you're
required.
going to
New
run the risk of
experimental.
begging the question. Sorry.
So, new experimental hypothesis would have to be formulated. Obviously, all CVs would be held constant, including density, because it's no longer being varied. Therefore, your apparatus would be totally different in order to validate electrostatic forces in terms of relative density disequilibrium and a vector being induced. Therefore, it won't be just plopping in a couple of electrodes. That's Adam's point. You have to develop a new hypothesis with new controls and a new experiment, i.e. a new setup to validate what you think causes the effect.
All right. So what was Adam's rebuttal to what Good Times for All did by keeping that balloon? You know, I thought that was kept, the density was kept, or buoyancy and density, whatever you want to call it, was kept at a constant, and then he manipulated the electricity going to it.
Man-made.
Is that not like
It's not studying a phenomena. It's man-made. Adam said that.
The gas in the, was it the gas in the balloon that was being affected? Was it the outer aluminium foil of the balloon that was being affected? Was it just the cable itself taking that high capacity voltage that was being affected? What was the effect? What are we looking at there, Righteous?
You wanted? Okay, I got you. See, it needs to be isolated more. Hold on, it needs to be isolated more, right? That's what your criticism is?
I don't know what the claim is. You've got a balloon strapped up to a Van de Graaff generator, and when you switch it on, it goes and the balloon moves. Right, lovely. What is that demonstrating to me other than if I strap balloons to a Van de Graaff generator, they'll go down?
Yeah, it's not passive. It requires an insert of an action that's not constant.
I'm not saying it doesn't prove anything. I'm asking you what's the supposition to move forward with, is what I'm saying. Yeah?
Exactly.
No, you don't go forth. No, it's no requirement to suppose this. It's a man-made parlor trick at that point. You first start with what the effect you're studying is. Now, this isn't a naturally observed phenomena, and when we say, well, what is, you start talking about bumblebees and spiders. That's what not you personally, but that's what we get. It's like, okay, well, that's the phenomena then. So we've moved away from relative density disequilibrium and trying to say, well, let's try and get hyper-specific about what's being controlled, see if we can get better accuracy in terms of our assertions, which have already been validated. So let's hold the density constant and vary things that were previously considered or not even considered as controls, vary them and see how much of an influence they also have on them, requiring new apparatus, requiring a new setup. That's it.
Nathan.
So the begging the question.
Hang on, just for okay. I got a hold of Sleeping Warrior. He's going to text me. He can't call in at the moment, but he's going to text me what he did. So I'll post that once he gets it. Go ahead,
I've got it, Temp. Right. I've got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay, you posted it.
He says, "I did."
May I just respond to Adam?
Well,
no, wait. I'm still waiting.
Just read Riley's bit, and then I did pass a current. Yes. It did not cause any acceleration. If I left it connected, electrolysis started, but no acceleration. So.
Okay, right. Go ahead, Eli. Then Solar.
And then Brian.
That's why I was saying be careful about begging the question, because if you're going into it saying, okay, electrostatics, okay, this is what's creating a downward bias. Now I'm going to try to create a setup to figure out, or a setup that will tell me exactly what and how this is happening. You can't do that.
Okay, Solar, go ahead.
Good point, Eli. In terms of what Adam was saying now, how does this have a bearing in terms of the real world? What got me curious about this topic was Viktor Grabinikov's research, where he claimed that he was able to levitate and fly around using simply the manipulation of an electric field. And then when you look at the Bell spacecraft that the Nazis developed in Second World War, which we now consider as UFOs, also was using counter-rotating fields, manipulating of a field to cause lift and acceleration. So I think there is some merit to it. Like Nathan said, how much percentage is it accounted for? The apple falling down, I don't really think has electrostatic involvement, but it is still falling through this field, which can, I guess, cause certain things.
Everything follows after the right-hand
You
rule,
can?
and if you oscillate that right-hand rule, you're going to create a vector 90 degrees perpendicular from the plane of inertia, which is how these crafts that we see being reported from the Pentagon are able to make these crazy turns without ever slowing down. It's literally like you said, a field array that's being oscillated.
Okay, we'll come to the
Have a
crazy crafts.
demonstration?
Hold on.
Hold on.
Brian's next. We'll come to the crazy crafts after Brian.
Yeah, for a start, right, just on what the lads were just saying there, right, that's all induced, right, by man. That's not a natural thing. The reason why some things go down and some things go up is down to the structural support of the medium. Objects weigh more in a vacuum because they don't have that little extra bit of support that they get from the air. It comes down to the medium. The medium determines what goes down, what goes up. I can float wood on water, but wood will fall through air. If the medium doesn't have enough structural support, enough structural density, if you want to call it density resistance, call it whatever you want, it's the same thing. If the medium doesn't have enough density, then the object or substance is going to fall through it. If it does have enough density, then the substance or object will rise. That is the reason why things go down and things go up. I can take that and go into any university. This is how confident I am. I can go into any university, anywhere, onto any television program, anywhere in the world, and I can prove with many demonstrations that everyone will understand, and I can support it through scientific method. Right? That is the reason.
Well, with that understanding,
But how does
then how do you
Victor-
account?
Hold on, Solar.
How do you account?
Go ahead, Dicelo.
I was just going to say, like when you put a magnet through a copper tube and you have the copper tube on a scale, you can see the weight and difference before the magnet ever reaches the bottom of that copper tube. There's a noticeable change there. And you would say that's Lenz's law, but I would say it's something different. And that kind of debunks what you just said.
Hold on, everyone stop. Everyone
zero
stop.
then,
Hold on. So, I don't know who said it a moment ago, but I think it might have been Adam or Brian. Yeah, these aren't phenomena that are natural. So, that's where I was going to come in with the spaceship thing. We're trying to establish the cause of something that isn't a naturally occurring phenomena. Now, when it comes to spacecraft, if they are in existence, it might just be propaganda for all I know. I don't care. But if they were, let's assume they are, then that's a man-made device doing its man-made thing. Not something that's going to need experimental validity ascribed to it, because we know the cause already. A man made it to do that. Yeah? Now, again, you can boil that down to a natural phenomenon when it comes to spiders or bumblebees, but then you question how much this relates out into the world we experience, And other than that particular very narrow, very specific phenomena being utilized to create potentially these wonderful man-made devices that can turn on a dime, other than that, it doesn't actually expand out into the rest of physics because it's technology. It might be technology that's come from science. If it has come from those spiders and bumblebees, then fantastic. That's where its application lies, not in us and our debate here.
May I interject something,
No.
Nathan? Arwen, can you get lost? You're the rudest person I have ever met.
Dude,
Literally.
you've been blabbering the entire time. When's the last time I spoke
Stop,
up?
stop. Go ahead, 10th.
Thank you. When Rayleigh did his egg test prior to adding the salt, was the egg moving because of the electrostatics that were everywhere, or was the egg at the bottom? If he had done it another day where the barometer read a different reading, or if he had done it another day where he's at a higher elevation when he was going to do the test, I bet you anything that egg would stay at the bottom of that glass. The only time that egg moved with all of these things at different levels in elevation or different levels of it due to the barometer and humidity and temperature, the only time that egg moved was when he added salt. I'm done.
Right, so I'd like to add on to that something that I've been wanting to say for 10 minutes.
You can, but after Solar, who's tried to get in 3
No,
times. Then Solar, then
no,
Arwen.
no.
Solar, then Arwen.
No.
Go ahead, Solar.
Fuck's
I'll
sake.
concede to Arwen. He can
Go
get
ahead,
his
Arwen.
point in.
Fair enough. Go ahead.
It still
Arwen, then
relates
Solar.
to what Tony said, right? Oh, electrolysis. I only noticed electrolysis. Well, guess what? Electrolysis of salt in water is going to change the water's density because the salt is not going to evaporate. The water is. That's a point that's like 20 minutes ago now, right? That's how much room I have to insert something here.
No, fair enough. Good point.
Well, I'm being
Okay,
rude,
yeah,
10th
no.
man.
Are you saying that by like a second order effect, you've got the a density change being induced as a result of electrolysis? Yeah, good point.
Exactly.
And my point is that
Sorry
you're
for
still
being so
manipulating the
rude.
medium. In terms of applying a current to the medium is not what we've been describing when you apply the current to the object. So you'd have to actually apply the current to the egg to get the egg to then displace itself in a constant medium, which was demonstrated by doing the balloon demonstration. But we can demonstrate like acoustic levitation and various ways of creating upward propulsion, or so there's various things which create this upward or downward movement. And I think they're kind of, like Nathan said, they're kind of interrelated. Kind of think of them like refraction. We used to use the word refraction, but now we know it's either superior mirage or it's the different aspects of refraction. Now we've drilled down so we understand when that's occurring, it's because of this specific miraging effect. I think we're in that same sort of discussion as to the object is falling because of a density relationship, but can that density relationship actually be manipulated by a current in the way that Viktor Grebennikov could get himself to levitate off the earth by simply inducing a current? But like you guys have said, that's also a man-made piece of equipment, so it's not a natural manipulation which we would expect to see in nature.
Right, so that's a good question, if I may respond to that uninterrupted, right? Yeah, can something actually change the relation and the effects of relative density other than changing the density of the object or medium? I don't think you can, but yeah, you can counteract the disequilibrium force through other influences like electrostatics or magnetics, all these things. But I've never heard of anything that actually changes the relative density disequilibrium force on itself. It's pretty standalone.
The Grebennikov claims are just that. They're very ropey, dodgy Russian footage of something that's proclaimed to happen. I showed a little picture of the Scarababor just to look at those under the wings because they're supposed to work under the same principle. But again, we're basing things on anecdotal evidence at best. There's no Binikoff device that actually is there demonstrable and working on these principles. All we've got is, like I say,
a bumblebee.
Well,
just the
again,
bumblebee in its physicality should not be able to fly, let alone into the wind, which it can do.
Once again, you're presupposing that the reason it does fly, that it shouldn't fly, is because of this. You're not demonstrating it. Like I say, I bought the scarab to look at that because it's the same principle on their wings. That's why they're revered by the Egyptians. Yeah, but there's nothing there that I can then repeat, verify, or think other than the scarab or the bumblebee. They're the only things that do it. There's nothing I can take out of it and say, look, I can isolate this and demonstrate that this effect. Yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't, because I've seen it. Yeah, like I say, I'm intrigued by it. But the reality is of what you can take from it is just that bees can fly and they shouldn't really. But we can't actually get a state that it is this effect that enables it.
Has anyone actually looked into a bumblebee? Because the claim was that it shouldn't be able to fly. That was the claim, but it does fly. So that means their claim has to be wrong. It's a black swan situation. That bumblebee can't fly because its aerodynamics is wrong, but it does fly. So your claim is incorrect. So that claim that we've heard for years and years and years, I always hated that. I always got angry at it. It's like it was such an arrogant claim and so badly thought out. It's like, if you're claiming it can fly, how come it can't? Has anyone actually tested the density of the bumblebee in comparison to a wasp or a fly? Has anyone actually done that?
Yes, they have.
Of course.
Yeah, they have. But it's all about the wing surface versus the total mass or weight of the creature, right? But this is all based on old aerodynamics, like old plane things. And there have been so many developments since then. Look, these jumbo jets, if you get deeper into it, I won't do it right now, you'll find out that, like bumblebees, that's not really supposed to function either, right? But they do, so they found a way, and so has nature's design for the bumblebees. They just use something extra, and that makes it work.
The bumblebee is taking advantage of the lift effect. That's what the bumblebee is doing. It's taking advantage of the lift effect with its wings.
No.
That's what.
No, but not just that. It is also electrostatic offset. It's the combination of it all.
So like
the
Owen said, it's a
electrostatics give
ratio.
it a slight nudge.
Well, we don't know
There's a specific
we
ratio.
do. It's measurable. It's measurable.
How can you measure a bumblebee when it's flying?
You can measure its electrostatics output.
That's what I wanted to know.
Listen,
and it was a very genuine question. Oh, before you,
so I've posted it
earlier.
In the
has it been measured, the electrical output of a bumblebee or a fighter?
Do you even know what electricity is to begin with?
It is physically vibrating, so it's creating a sound.
How much sound? Is the sound influential on this effect? Have we studied it? Have we ruled it out? Because it's just being controlled and assumed to not affect it at the moment. So,
feel it.
I think we should all spend considerable amount of time on studying the effects that the sound the bumblebee makes on its actual levitation, not the electrostatic forces or the flapping of its wings very fast, the sound that it makes, because I'm sure that has an influence. It makes a sound after all.
No, it's not just that. You can I can feel the bumblebee without hearing it. I can feel it at a distance because it has indeed a unique vibration. So there's something beyond.
But does that come down to vibrations in life then, Arwen?
Yeah, that's the vibration that's being interpreted as an electrostatic thing.
Right, but they do vibrate extra, just like moths do. Moths are also very heavy, really, for the for the lift they have.
Yeah, indeed.
So the vibration.
Can I just clarify something quickly?
Go ahead, Solar. Just 1 second, Brian. Go ahead, Solar.
Sorry, I blended two topics here. I just checked myself. And I see that they assign acoustic levitation to the flight of a bumblebee. So Nathan's right. We're not talking about electrostatics anymore. Now it's
What?
acoustic
I was
levitation.
saying it sarcastically. You're telling me that it is actually the case?
Frequency, geometry,
Oh, my
and
bad.
electricity are all
Sorry,
I
guys.
was
Slow.
actually right. I was actually right.
Yeah.
According to mainstream, bumblebees fly very differently than planes. While air flows smoothly over an aircraft wing or rotor blade, bees move their wings at an acute angle to the air, creating vortices that curl around the wing. Bees can maintain flight by rapidly moving their wings. That is the mainstream.
What, but flapping their wings? This is profound.
Yeah.
This is insane because it's
nature technology is incredible.
I'm glad we established that.
No, but
so let me get
we're
it
not
straight.
talking about
Just
bees.
sorry, Solar. Sorry. Just more clarity, just for
didn't
the audience's
understand that that's
benefit.
mainstream,
Let me just
right?
get it straight.
Mainstream.
Just need to get it clear. So they fly by flapping their wings. Is that correct?
And creating
what a breakthrough.
That's with bees. A bumblebee,
Yeah,
which we were talking about, cannot perform that same function because the ratio of its wing surface area to the mass is considered a physics impossibility.
Okay, Brian's got
It
something
could
to say on
flap its
that.
wing.
We heard, Solar. I think Brian's got something to say on that.
Yeah, I mean, what about the area of a helicopter's wings in comparison to the helicopter? You're denying the lift effect. All you need to do is create the lift effect. That's what the bumblebee is doing, is creating the lift effect. And once that lift effect is created, which is a pressure differential, it lifts.
Hold on, Brian. Have you ruled out that
Right, like a vacuum. It
have
creates
you
a
ruled out
vacuum.
that the sonic effects of the sound itself aren't actually causing that lift, Brian? Have you ruled it out? I mean, it's definitely making a sound. Let's be honest.
Well, here's a good point that
I
he just
agree
made
with-
because the helicopter gains altitude through its
Eli, you're causing
through its
chaos.
propellers,
Hold
but
on
it
a
doesn't
second.
steer itself. It steers itself through that rear rudder, and a bumblebee doesn't have a rear rudder.
It
No,
doesn't
but
have a
bumblebee
rotor.
can change its wings in flight, change the way it moves its wings in flight to change its direction.
Right,
It's
so-
creating the lift
No,
effect.
that's not true.
That's all it's doing. The pressure differential. That's what causes the lift effect.
So
That's
it's
actually
more
not
like
true.
cymatic lift, really. It's just
here-
creating a local, through vibration, creating local air pressure differential to pull it up like a vacuum, a micro vacuum, right? That's more like cymatic lift, really, then.
Well, if you think about like say birds, right? They flap their wings up and down to get lift, right? Now they may angle them in certain ways to glide on the air, but ultimately they just flap their wings up and down. Bees do this whole rowboat kind of situation. Like it's just a whole different dynamic for the way they fly. Like to say that it needs like a back propeller or something, they just fly because they do. Like I don't. What's the like?
Yeah,
I'm done.
I understand your frustration, Eli.
It's just like those small RC jets, right? There are these small RC jets that can stop at the dime and do 90-degree turns and things like this. Something that was aerodynamically impossible for planes of that shape, according to people who tell us that the things in the sky can't be drones. So I don't understand this. Oh, it has to be this because it's doing this stuff. That's the
Well, you got to
it's the
understand
same
that birds
logic. It's the same
birds
logic.
can't fly
It's the sa-
directly up. They flap their wings and they fly forward. They can't fly backwards. Whereas a bumblebee can
Another
turn any
profound
direction.
statement.
It can go up.
Eli.
It can go down. It can go backward.
Once you've ended, guys, you've got to stop talking through each other. Once somebody's ended, you can't just decide to add an extra point when someone started talking.
Fair enough.
It's something I have to point out here, right? We don't have evidence that the bumblebee, right, is harnessing electrostatic, right, forces, right? We don't have that evidence. We do have evidence for the lift effect. But let's just say the bumblebee was harnessing a certain amount of electrostatic forces, right? That means the little thing is inducing it. It's not. It's something that only happens by the bumblebee making it happen. The same way as the balloon sticks to the wall because you make it stick to the wall by your actions. It's not, as Aaron says, a passive thing where something will fall to the ground because it's more dense than the medium that surrounds it. The medium can't keep it up. It doesn't have the density. It doesn't have the support underneath it to stop it from going down. Or why something will lift up like a helium balloon because the density surrounding it does have enough density to displace it up to it.
Right,
Do you understand?
Like you said,
it has to be induced.
Hold on. Let's Solar respond. Go ahead, Solar.
But the bumblebee has no density change, and then lift occurs.
For wings.
Neither does an airplane.
For wings.
Right, air pressure differential. That's what does it. But in a very specific order, and I think that cymatics might be involved. I said earlier that bumblebees might be electrostatic. I mixed them up. Sorry, it wasn't. That's spiders.
But it's all your fault.
It's
all your fault.
But it's equivalent to like as a human flapping your hands as a human, or taking a tray under each arm and flapping that.
No.
It couldn't achieve lift.
No, hands versus wings.
Yeah, surface area in a ratio to mass or weight.
Right, back to the helicopter example. I thought we covered all of this.
You're missing the point, right? The reason humans can't do it is we don't have the physical abilities within our shoulders, and our arms aren't wings. You know what I mean? We can't. Yeah, we can't create. Yeah, we can't create the lift effect. Right? A bumblebee can create the lift effect. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, a helicopter can't rise unless its motor's running.
In the interest of balance.
It's spinning those blades.
Look, just in the interest of balance.
And usually it's counter-rotating blades to create enough opposition for the top blade to create. So it's a whole different dynamic to simply a wing that's by its surface area is too small to generate sufficient lift, but it does create lift in ample proportion, and this thing can propel itself through headwinds. Whereas even our aircraft, if we go into a headwind, we slow down, and they showed that bees and bumblebees, their speed doesn't change regardless of which way the wind is blowing. So there's almost like an...
Come on! You've got to be having me on. You serious?
So they were talking about in gale force winds, when you've got 100-kilometer winds, the bees can still get back to their hive. And they were looking at various speeds of wind, and they put little sensors on the bees to track the bees' motion, and they flew, like if it was a really strong headwind, slightly diagonally, but their speed wasn't altered. And if you put
this just sounds like complete
plane
bollocks.
doing that.
Little sensors on bumblebees. I mean, you're telling me if I put a bumblebee, if I put a hive in a wind tunnel, right? You're telling me that they'll be able to make it all the way to the fan blades and through because they're unaffected and out to their hive? No.
Hold on, the glide effect, if I may. The glide effect might have actually something to do with the cymatics, right? If you create a pocket of vacuum because of the cymatics, then you'd be surprised that you might not be affected by the regular air pressure that's moving uniformly around you. So it might have to do another effect of the cymatics.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Owen. It comes back to my original point in this regard, right? Even when it was spiders and bumblebees that were linked to electrostatic effects, who cares? This isn't what bumblebee debate. This isn't a zoo, and none of it directly relates back to other than looking at interesting effects of lift now. Okay, how does this relate to the nature of reality? Yeah, you can produce lift if you're more dense than the air and you shouldn't really be supported by it. You can defy, seemingly, physics by having a set of wings. Okay, yeah, this is great, but how does it help us in terms of the debate about the nature of reality? So hyper-specific.
Not, in other words, does anybody think any of this bee and spider stuff is happening on a magical ball?
Damn it, you stole my point. I was waiting until the end to do that, Chocolate.
Bro, I've been waiting for like an hour to do that, man. Come on. What are we talking about? Bumblebees and shit. I mean, this is cool, but
Nathan nailed it again, because what I've just posted in the main chat in Discord is when they put bumblebees in weather tunnels, in wind tunnels, and then studying the way that the wind flowed around them, they've developed these bad weather drones that can fly into wind and do whatever they need to. So, yeah, they did put sensors and they did study it.
My God. I'm saying it like in sarcasm, and it is actually claimed to be true.
You nailed it.
You nailed it perfectly.
Nathan the beekeeper.
Therefore, the Earth is a sphere, boys. Y'all are done.
Exactly.
Nobody's trying to prove a sphere. Nobody here is trying to prove a sphere.
So
there's also that.
But why not?
You know that
Doesn't most
gyroscopes.
of the world think they live on a sphere? Why is nobody here to try to prove that?
Well,
You know
because the
that when you
people that
go
are
with
here still think that they're
it flies further and higher than when it's not spinning, right? So there's that as well.
Powerful statement that Harp just made. Only a couple of people picked up on it, right? I know he wasn't saying it to make that point. He's saying, well, look, in terms of us discussing bumblebee wings and electromagnetic forces or electrostatic forces or sandwiching gravity or decrying a downward vector, you know, none of us here are trying to prove a sphere, was the statement that he said. In other words, yeah, this doesn't have anything to do with proving a sphere, but the statement was actually, none of us here are trying to prove a sphere. Very powerful statement you made.
Thank you, and I hope it's true.
Yeah, what some of us are here to do is still hold up a downward bias, though.
Yeah, but that's really
I made it very
irrelevant as
clear
to
that that's
shape
not
the
me.
Earth.
So I don't know who is. Nobody I talk to is trying to prove a downward bias when we're trying to do these things. As far as I know.
Bob Nodell claims a downward bias.
Oh, we're not doing
Bob
this with
Nodell
Bob
is not
Nodell.
here.
He's not my buddy. Don't like Bob Nodell.
Yeah, let's keep the vendettas against Bob Nodell out of this.
Eli, you're causing
It's
chaos
not a
again.
vendetta. Hang on.
Eli.
Hang on 1 second. Righteous. It's not a vendetta. I made a very valid point. As Bob is the biggest, the most well-known, with the biggest outreach pusher of the electrostatic claim. So
All right,
me saying that Bob Nodell claims a downward bias is just a fact.
Let me say this. Ballers come to us and say, well, flat earthers say this and flat earthers say that. And we tell them, you're talking to me, not to other flat earthers.
Are you going to retract your vendetta statement then?
Yes.
Well, here's the thing, right? So it's not like we're strawmanning people. When people bring up electrostatics, they're usually talking about what gives things their vector. That's usually what they're trying to link it to. That's why I said downward bias. I don't know anybody who's looking up bees that's not trying to do that or tie it to that.
Whatever.
But
I
if
just,
I'm wrong,
I
fair
just see
enough.
these people as a load of Bob Nodell fans. That's all I'm hearing.
No, we're
I'll tell
just.
you right now, I've seen bees and hummingbirds both, whatever they feel like doing in high winds, like personally right out front of my house. Watched it. I know wind really doesn't affect them.
We know
without saying doing the wind tunnels. I've seen it.
Ideas have consequences. We're quoting Bob Nodell.
I sucked some bees up with the shop vac too, so I don't know if it's that's completely true.
We weren't quoting Bob Nodell. When Righteous started this conversation, Bob Nodell was far away from any idea that we had.
No, that's not what I'm referencing. What I'm referencing is once Righteous said it was a vendetta, and Brian had to correct him and saying, no, this is his position. He's got recordings. We've heard them. He's had his boy on the show on QE's channel, which it gets it, debating Brian, which was a debacle. It's not a vendetta. We're quoting their position, and Righteous called it a vendetta. He took it back. Good for him. So yeah, we made a transition. You're going back to the beginning of the show. Well, if we're going to do that, then I want to go back to what makes the egg rise.
I got you. I misunderstood. I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
misunderstood.
exactly. And their position is basically your position. So, God damn it, we will stereotype fallacy with this. So you just have to deal with it, Bob Nodal fans.
When did the egg rise? Yeah.
After Rayleigh manipulated the medium.
By adding
electrostatic shock.
We had salt and we added sugar.
You
Yeah,
didn't listen
salt.
to me. I told you this was going to get worse and worse. And Neil is always right.
It's not
Bunch of
getting
bombers.
worse. It's not getting worse, Neil. The world is as it was when I woke up, when I was born, and before I was born. We're just people talking about the nature of reality. Some people have other ideas totally untethered to reality. That's never going to change.
There's you. I've just had an invoice for £300.
What?
We got
Can
the
I
egg
state
to
that
rise
we?
with
But why does a spider rise?
Can
The
I
spider
state
doesn't rise because of.
I was just going to
No,
talk
let me
about
just
the
summarize.
spoilers.
It's not manipulating the medium in that instance. It's manipulating itself or something to do with the object. So if we're going to look at can an object change its frequency to cause either a rise or fall in a standard medium, then that's the looking at the other side of the same effect of objects rising. What causes an egg to rise? What causes a spider to rise? One is the medium. The other is an inherent frequency change in the object.
Doesn't an egg rise or fall when it's good or bad? So what's the change there in it?
Density. Density of the object has changed because there's more methane gas being released by the.
But it's not living though. So it's not living. You put it in the water. One rises, one's sinking, once it's dead. But there's nothing changing there.
There is. If there's a release of gas, then it's becoming more dense.
No, you actually got a good point, because what you're saying, what's changing in the air? Well, entropy. Yeah, it's decaying. In other words, when you get down to the nitty-gritty of what causes the underlying description of what you've got ascribed as the cause in the cause and effect relationship, well, then you're looking at entropy. What caused that initial change? Well, entropy caused it. The arrow of time.
I just want to state that the whole spoiler claim. Now, Adam, 2 times on the show, Adam has brought up the information about the spoiler claim. And we spoke about it only a week ago, where the spoiler creates like a kite type situation. And it's not all of these type of spoilers. It's the smaller of these type of spoilers. The smaller ones, the more adolescent ones that do it. The ones that are bigger are they're too dense and heavy to do it. That's the problem. It's an effect that certain spoilers can't take. This one type of spoiler or whatever, or 1 or 2 types of spoilers can't take advantage of, and it only seems to be the more adolescent ones.
Yeah,
that's attributed to electrostatics. Go on, Eli. Sorry.
When we brought this up before, I brought up how people, is it called paragliding? Whatever the people do when they're gliding, they can start from ground level and work their way up in elevation because of the updrafts of wind. Okay.
Yeah, they demonstrated it's not a sail effect. It's not causing a catching of the wind to cause propulsion the way we would on water. They tested that by increasing the wind speed, which would effectively create more friction along the line. And by increasing the wind speed, it didn't necessitate that they started to balloon. But when they interfered with the frequency of the entire box, they could either negate all ballooning of the spiders or encourage the ballooning of the spiders. So the initial idea when they first saw it was that the air friction along this long tether eventually must create some kind of a sail effect, but that would also take the spider anywhere the wind is going, And it's shown that these spiders will lift and then descend in certain locations. So they've got some level of more control than simply holding up a rudder or a sail and catching the wind. And the thin strand, when they tested it at different wind speeds, they basically showed that increasing the wind speed didn't create more lift the way that increasing wind speed with a sail increases acceleration.
I think you're exactly right, because the spiders travel more when there's thunder in the sky. Exactly right.
Oh my gosh. So a parachutist who lands on the ground on a windy day, if he doesn't wrap up his parachute, is he going to stay in the same place, or is we going to move him?
Right. A kite doesn't automatically just hang in there. Depends on what type of kite of it is, of course. But if you have control of it, you can make sure that the kite is not basically straight. What is it, perpendicular to the wind?
Can you fly
straight catching the wind, and it'll just fall. So
without wind?
Like that too.
If there's no wind, the kite can't stay up.
It's a different kind of flight.
Hello. Maybe it like twists the wire and then changes the lift effect of the apparent kite it's creating, so it can just drop.
From my reading,
who knows?
I did read the paper on that. Well, it's not. It's more an article, I think, that summarises the experiment. What the spiders appear to do is they're able to sense an electron field, an electric field coming in, which is indicative of an incoming wave front. When they detect it, it makes them stand on the tippy toes and get ready to balloon. Now, what was interesting, there is in some of the spiders, levitation in a sealed box was occurred. They weren't flying off and guiding themselves, but they did lift off the ground. Some of them didn't. I don't think there was any claim that they had real control. In fact, the stuff we read was it's a risky way of disseminating yourself, but in areas of high population, it's better to do that and kind of get yourself into a different area than it is to stay within a highly populated area. That appeared to be the natural mechanism. It didn't imply we're booking a flight to the north of the Congo or whatever they were doing. It was appeared quite random, whilst just a methodology of getting themselves airborne. And once they're up there with the air currents, then I think that was what I read. I didn't read any other more significant that even to the point that they did state that not all the spiders that were tippy-toeing actually took off with the field when the field was applied. So it wasn't guaranteed. So maybe there's more to it, less to it, I don't know. But I think to draw any more inference than its effect that spiders do, until you can nail down what that is, to take it forward into something else, I think's ridden with errors, isn't it? It's going to be riddled with errors because you've not ascertained exactly what has gone off.
Perfect. With that, I'm going to say another huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's after show possible. And of course, a massive thank you to all of you for hopefully liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, hitting the PayPal link, helping me out with my projector bulb bill, and all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
what a day! What a lovely day!